And welcome to our Board of Education and / business meeting. It is December 8th. We'll call this meeting to order, and the time is 7:35. Welcome everyone. You will notice this evening there is a slight different configuration to the board table. There was a pulling of the board, and what we did was try and create something that we felt was a little bit more reflective of the roles and responsibilities. We have central office staff sitting here close to Dr. Clark. We have people who are elected officials, some of them who are still sitting too far back, Mr. Clark back there. But it actually is just to really recognize and as a courtesy to note that we do have elected officials who frequently do attend our meetings. So I'll ask everyone please to stand now and call the roll. I'm sorry. Yeah. Are you all here? We have Mr. Liu, we have Mrs. Dow, we have Mr. Mottola, Mrs. Alvin's going to be here this evening. We have Mrs. Zahn, myself, Mrs. Iacono, Mr. Carey, and Mr. Fadby. Thank you. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first matter we have before us is approval of minutes. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the education meeting of November. I believe there was a typo. We received a revised agenda. It actually was to correct the typo. It is from November 18th and a special meeting, November 10th and a special meeting of November 18th. It was a correction from the 16th to the 18th. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Zahn, seconded. Mrs. Iacono. Discussion? Any amendments? Comments from the board? Comments from the public? Seeing none, are they all ready to vote? All in favor of approving of the minutes? All in favor, Mr. Liu, Mrs. Dow, Mr. Mottola, Mrs. Zahn, Mrs. Iacono, Mr. Carey, Mr. Fadby, and myself. Thank you very much. Old business, approval of music curriculum, grades 6 through 8. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the music curriculum, grades 6 through 8. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Zahn, seconded. Mr. Mottola. Discussion? Mr. Carey?
I'll get my pile up here. I'd like to start off by complimenting the superintendent and staff. This is an excellent curriculum. I had a chance to go through it in depth, and it was a very impressive piece of work. In particular, I had a couple of questions, not specific to the actual delivery of the curriculum, but in terms of what we're going to be having coming through the middle school, since this addresses 6 to 8. A lot of the different components from orchestra to band have small lessons taking place with instructors and groups no larger than 5 students. So my question on that component was, based on the influx of students we anticipate in the middle school level, will there be a need to hire more qualified instructors to meet that population increase?
We actually central office met with the middle school principals today. This was a topic of discussion. Mrs. Fitzgerald, the middle school principals, and Mrs. Schmardell are taking a look at all of the numbers. You're exactly right, there is an influx. And what we're hoping to do is make very minor adjustments where we must, being aware of the budget, but also knowing how strong the program is.
So we're going to be able to maintain the 5 students to instructor?
We hope so, but that will bring you the details when we present the budget.
The other component with that is I noticed that we had a lot of items, depending on which it was, technical resources ranging from metronomes to computers to actually deliver the curriculum. Do they end up in the technology budget? Is it a different part of the budget? And do we have any concerns in terms of the need for more of these items as we expand the program? And in particular, do we have concerns about appropriate spaces to actually deliver this curriculum in light of some of the construction that we're going to have going on at Fairfield Woods? And my key concern is ensuring that we have built into our plan appropriate spaces to continue to deliver the curriculum as we add students into Fairfield Woods Middle School.
That was also something we discussed today, the equipment. We're taking a look at all requests for equipment. Some of the smaller items would come under supplies. Some of the larger instruments, for example, would be part of capital outlay. So we're reviewing those with all of the principals. You're right, space is an issue.
I just want, from a board perspective, be cognizant of that as the discussion is going to continue in terms of what we build at Fairfield Woods Middle School, and programs like this can be impacted if we don't have appropriate spaces to actually deliver the curriculum we're approving tonight.
Thank you, and I believe actually Dr. Clark later on in this meeting will be actually alluding to some of those issues.
Thank you.
Do we have any further discussion from the board? Any comments then from the community? Seeing none, are we ready for a vote? All in favor of approving the motion for the music curriculum? Again, Mr. Liu, Mrs. Dow, Mr. Mottola, Mrs. Zahn, Mrs. Iacono, Mr. Carey, and Mr. Dadabine, all in favor? Thank you. For new business, we have an update from the superintendent search. We have Hazard, Young, and ITEA representatives here this evening. We'd like to address the board and let everyone know in the community as well where we are. Thank you. We have Mr. John Chambers and Ms. Debbie Races. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure being here tonight. We wanted to review the process first and then give you just a quick overview of the report. Do you have the reports? Do you have copies of the reports? Either passed out?
Either were leadership profile reports.
Okay. If not, they'll be on the back table. Okay. That's fine.
More available.
And they'll also be put on your website after the board approves it. Wanted to talk, just to quickly review the process with you, just to remind you what the process was. John and I were in the district on November 9th and 10th. We spent 2 very full days in the district. We met with approximately 89 people. We also received back around 58 forms, all of which is shown in this report in terms of our summary of what we heard and what we read. We advertised as well for candidates in Ed Week. That's been going on since November and into December, and have been also online in Ed Week, and have also done advertising on several professional websites. And just to repeat again, what John and I really do is to recruit for you, and once we have the leadership profile and the characteristics that you're looking for and have a sense of the district from spending those 2 very important days in the district, that we go out and get the best possible candidates, and we're hoping that the board then will interview candidates in early winter, and that a new superintendent will be in place by July 1st, and we're certainly on track to do that. Just to remind you, as you look at the report, please remember that everything is done alphabetically, so there's no priority in this list. It's an alphabetical list, so keep reminding yourselves as you read it, it's an alphabetical list. And the other thing that I would remind you is that when you look at consistent in all the groups, that means that this is what this characteristic or this strength or this issue we heard from all the groups that we met with, and that and so it won't be reflected again in the individual groups because it was reflected as a consistent in the consistent grouping. So you won't hear it again repeated. It's because everybody said it, and so it's under consistent. And John's going to go through body of the report.
Thank you, Debbie. I should probably say that Debbie and I bring different perspectives to our work as search consultants. Debbie was a school board president, and I was a school superintendent. Before that, I was a social studies teacher, and that makes me glad that some of you don't have the report yet, because I learned as a social studies teacher, you'll appreciate it more if you read it after our introduction. What we're trying to do is just give you a flavor of the process, and I'll try to give you just a few of the highlights in the report itself. But I really do hope that that's an appetizer that causes you to look at it more closely. And since we see that there are many people in the room, starting with the board, but many others in the audience, who actually were part of our interview process or gave us back written feedback, we hope that the report sounds to you like it got things right. If it didn't, we'd like to hear about it. I said that to the board earlier tonight. So we asked 3 basic questions. Pride in the Fairfield schools, strengths of the Fairfield schools. What did people want to say to us about that? Then second, issues or concerns or needs of the Fairfield schools. And third, what characteristics did people think were needed in the next superintendent who will succeed Dr. Clark? We got very candid and helpful answers. We appreciate the fact that people came out, gave us those forms back, and talked to us. We did think there were some commonalities, as you will see in the report. Under strengths of the Fairfield schools, the first thing we say in the narrative portion of the report was how struck we were by the degree of pride and satisfaction that we heard expressed about your schools. We do searches in other places. We often hear expressions of pride and satisfaction, but the degree to which that pride was expressed here was truly exceptional. It was great to hear. So it leads off the report. We also heard in the area of strengths that the community has been consistent in its support of the schools, not least of all consistent in its support of school budgets and expenditures for capital improvements. We know you've had a lot of enrollment growth and had to do a lot of building. People were proud of that. And we were also delighted to see among the strengths, people strengths mentioned. Parents were cited by nearly all the groups as one of the great strengths of the Fairfield schools. So was the staff, from administrators to teachers to support staff. And most happily, perhaps, Fairfield students really seem to be a source of pride. Their accomplishments, their skills, where they go to college, the fact that they go to college, and as some teachers said to us, they're just a pleasure to have in class. That was a delight to hear. Issues, needs, concerns, just a few highlights. We would have been surprised had budget not been first on this list. And you would have been alone in Fairfield County and perhaps in the United States if budget was not a concern at this point. But not surprisingly, many people led off with that, mostly expressing a hope that the schools would somehow be able to continue to enjoy the kind of community support that you have historically, and that different groups within the community would not be caught in a competition for a resource squeeze. People were conscious of the fact that your enrollment growth is not done, and also that there are shifting needs in the student population. There was an expressed hope that even in these challenging budget times, you would all find ways to manage well. Finally, in the headlines under concerns, issues, needs, communication. This played out in a variety of ways that you'll see as you read the report. Typically, when we do these reports, we hear something about communication. We all know it can always be better. We did hear that need here in some ways, and you'll see that in the report too. Finally, the third category, the characteristics needed in the next superintendent of schools, goes right back to that last category from needs and concerns. An excellent communicator. Over and over again, we heard that the new superintendent needs to be an excellent communicator. We often heard compliments to Dr. Clark about her communication skills. But at the same time, people invoked the need for that communication skill, again, in a time of tighter resources. We heard that the new superintendent must be an advocate for the schools, not just a communicator about the schools, but an advocate, not least of all, to the community for the resources the school needs. We heard about professional experience. We heard pretty consistently that people want someone here who has demonstrated strong educational leadership, probably as a superintendent, probably in a district with some similarities that would aid that person in understanding Fairfield and leading its schools. Probably as a successful superintendent. We also heard some desired characteristics that we thought were a little bit more personal: trust, integrity, and ability to earn respect. Also political savvy. But it was interesting, as people mentioned to us political savvy, almost everyone hastened to say, it can't be all political. This is not a politician you need, but somebody who has a political savvy to understand the interworkings of school and community and the various groups, but also somebody who is willing and able to confront the most difficult issues facing your schools, even under pressure, and to make the right choices, even if they might not always be the most popular choices. Those are the three sections. We do hope you'll read the report. We trust you'll find it posted on the website. And we hope you'll continue not only to tune into the process as it unfolds through the remainder of the school year, but continue to offer the kind of support to your schools and your superintendent, your board, that has earned such pride here in the past. Ms. Brand, anything else you'd like us to undertake?
No, we appreciate you taking the time, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe we have the next thing on the agenda is presentation of the high school counseling program. Now, do you folks need some of us to move, or?
Please, you're fine.
Mr. Perna, would you and Mr. Tattle like to come and sit here?
I think we'll stand here at the podium to have access to the laptop. But if you folks wouldn't mind, if we could maybe shut this side of the room's light so we could see the PowerPoint.
Sorry.
While we're getting our technology up and running, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Dr. Clark, Mrs. Brand, and members of the board, and welcome new members of the board, and thank you for inviting Frank and I to come before you tonight to share and have this opportunity to provide you with an overview. And it is an overview. We have a short amount of time, we know, we're on a limited time frame here, but we're going to try in our short amount of time to give you a good amount of information about the counseling services that exist at each of the high schools, and hopefully give you some insight into the hard work that the school counselors do every day. Before we get started, we'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our staff members to all of you, and if they're here, we're going to put them on the spot and have them stand up and say hello. So I'm going to turn this over to Frank because we're going to start with the Ludlow staff.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Introducing the Fairfield Ludlow staff, I'm proud to welcome from Warner House, Jen McVeigh, Courtney Trahan, and Lois Wallman. From Webster House, we have Christina Karen, Tony Samuelian. Unfortunately, Amy Mannion could not join us tonight. Ironically, she's being sworn in at the Board of Education in her hometown of Bethel. And then at Wright House, we have Bridget McHugh, Brent Metlin, and Monica Struzik. And last but certainly not least, we have the director of our College and Career Center, Alice Gorman. And I'm Frank Tattle. I'm the director of Guidance and Pupil Services at Fairfield Ludlow High School.
And for the ward staff in Fitz House, I'd like to introduce Nicole Colleran, Julianne Dietz, who couldn't be with us this evening, and Linda Love, who also couldn't be with us this evening. In Pequot House, we have Vin Adelolfi in the back there, Jill Cutter, and Gloria Pichet. And in Townsend House, we have Ali Shagnon, Gina DiGiacomo, and Daniel Jerkowitz. I don't think Gina could make it tonight. She's on her way. Okay. Our College and Career Center paraprofessional is Kate Lava, and she couldn't make it this evening, and I'm the director, Jim Perlin. So to get things started, I think it's important to lay some groundwork with everyone, and that's basically to share our mission. The mission of the school counseling department at both of the high schools is to prepare all students for a lifetime of learning through the development of skills that focus on academic, personal, social, and career, and obviously post-high school needs. Before we highlight some of the specific school counseling services that are offered at both Ludlow and Ward, I want to talk a little bit about what our model is based on. We take direction from the American School Counselor Association and the Connecticut School Counselor Association's comprehensive school counseling model. And the focus of that model operates under 3 domains: the academic development of students, the career and post-high school development of students, and the personal and social development. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about each of the standards that go along with those 3 domains, and then we're going to provide you with some specific examples of the work that the counselors do each day to deliver a program that meets the needs of those students under those 3 domains. Whenever I talk with folks about the role of a school counselor or what a school counselor does on the job every day, and if you were to think back on your own experience with your own school counselors, at the time probably called guidance counselors, you probably would give the same answer. Counselors did my schedule, and counselors helped me get into college. That's pretty much what comes to mind initially. I think you'll find, after coming to understand this comprehensive model a little bit more tonight and hearing about the work that they do each day, you'll realize that our program is much more than that. We develop, monitor, and refine our program using this model, and the program is developmental in nature, in that it meets the needs of students in a sequential manner. The program is delivered starting in grades 8 and commences in grade 12, and we try to meet the needs of the students as they developmentally progress as adolescents. It's also comprehensive in nature because it meets the academic, career, and personal social development of our students. I'm going to talk a little bit about those program standards that guide and drive our work in each of those 3 domains. Let's start with the academic. In the academic domain, we deliver services and programs that allow students to acquire skills to be successful in the classroom. This means that the work performed by the school counselors each day in this area assists students in developing positive attitudes towards lifelong learning and to be prepared to choose from a variety of post-secondary options. Under the career domain, the standards are spelled out to you, and I'm not going to take the time to read it word for word. You can do that through the PowerPoint. But we deliver services and programs that allow students to acquire skills to research and investigate various careers and post-high school options. Obviously, colleges are among those. This work involves understanding who they are as individuals, what they like, what they dislike, what their interests are, their personality, and how all of those components come together in making decisions about what to pursue after high school, in a college, or ultimately on a job. I think when we hear the word counselor, some of the obvious things come to mind when it comes to the personal and social development of students. School counselors use a variety of prevention and intervention models and programs to assist students in overcoming the barriers that unfortunately they come to face to their learning. We try to make strong connections with the educational opportunities in their schools and beyond, and we want to ensure that every child is learning in a safe, healthy, and supportive environment, both in school and at home. So those are the 3 domains and the 9 standards that we pull from the American School Counseling Association's model, and we use that to drive our program. And we're in a live program. Our program is very live. It's constantly in motion, constantly being revisited and refined based on the needs of students. Now, how do students access all of these services? How does that happen day to day? Obviously, students find their way into our offices on a need basis, but our delivery system is driven by the needs of students and the interest of students and obviously our community. And we deliver our services individually, in small groups. Sometimes counselors will be in the classroom delivering classroom instruction, and oftentimes our programs and services are delivered through a large group model, whether that be to a group of parents and students and such. So I just wanted to take a moment to share some examples of the academic school counseling services that exist at the school. These are just highlights of the types of things that the counselors do each day. Under the academic domain, counselors review all progress reports, report cards of students on their caseload. They determine next steps, which could include possibly a referral to a house staffing meeting. The house staffing meeting is where the deans and the housemasters and the counselors come together as a team to problem solve and to offer solutions to help students that are experiencing academic difficulty. They facilitate and monitor the 504 plans and meetings for students on their caseload. They work with teachers and parents to develop appropriate accommodations for students with medical issues, and they develop reasonable accommodations so that all students can access the curriculum. They obviously attend and participate in PPT meetings, and the SRBI and TIP teams, respectively, at Ludlow and Ward, are the response to intervention bodies of staff members that work to study and identify student issues and try to develop action plans to provide that team of teachers with ideas and strategies to help a student succeed. Under the academic domain, counselors obviously work on four-year planning with students through the course selection process in an ongoing manner. They help students make connections to the areas of interest that they have, the career exploration work that's been done with students. So all of that comes together under the academic domain. Some examples of career work that we do, especially in the 9th grade, and I'm going to highlight some of that a little bit later, the grade level programs that we have, but we do an awful lot of work helping students investigate careers and post-high school opportunities. Obviously, being in high school, that's where our focus is. We want kids to develop the skills and attributes and qualities so that they can be successful after high school. We do that providing them with information about themselves. We do interest inventorying, which helps students understand what they favor most and what coursework they favor most and how that's applied to the world of work. We do personality assessments with students, which helps them understand their personality type. It's a Myers-Briggs-based personality assessment. We do obviously a lot of work on the college search and the post-high school planning process. This is the thrust of our program. It's very heavy in the 11th and 12th grade, most especially. Kicking off with an overview session in 11th grade. Individual family meetings take place to help students and parents plot out their own personal plan of action to address the post-high school process. There's a tremendous amount of special programs that we offer. We just had an author in a couple of weeks ago. Dave Marcus spoke on his new book. We'll restart later. And we hold financial aid nights and parent-to-parent panel program through the PTA, which offers a lot of information and sharing of information with the community about the post-high school planning process. And it's a great collaborative effort, and we reach out to many resources to help our families through this process. In the senior year, there's a lot of individual and group work that goes on to help students deal with the pressures of senior year and making application to college and making final decisions. And of course, there's the letters of recommendation that need to be written. And under the personal and social domain, some of the examples of the work that the counselors do are listed here. I think one of the greatest challenges for counselors every day is to remove the barriers that students face, whether it be in their personal lives or physically or emotionally. We want them to be successful. So the greatest work that we do, and oftentimes it's the work that goes most unnoticed because it's behind closed doors and one-on-one or very personal between the student and the family. Counselors work very hard to remove those barriers, whatever they may be, so that students can continue to access the curriculum, attend school if at all possible, and be successful, and stay on path with their career and post-high school and college goals. You can't do this alone, and for all of this to work effectively, the counselors collaborate with all of these resources listed. The old saying, it takes a village. Well, I guess the saying goes for counselors as well. You can see we work together. It's not something we can do alone. We work together with parents and families, faculty, staff, and administrators. We have a fabulous counseling center staff of psychologists, social workers, and student assistance prevention specialists that help us take those barriers away and help students be successful. They reach out to outside agencies, oftentimes working with DCF or juvenile probation, child guidance, private therapists. They're in contact an awful lot with those folks to help us work together to develop a good plan of action for students. Without those collaborative relationships, this just wouldn't work. To give you an idea of what the counseling program looks like, grade level by grade level, we thought we would highlight some of the major activities that take place each year, starting with the 8th grade. Believe it or not, that's just around the corner, and we're getting ready to have the counselors go down to the 3 middle schools to visit and go over the program of studies and review the course selection process with students. This begins the work of the high school counselor-student relationship. And of course that involves course selection. We also offer at each high school an 8th grade night. At that 8th grade night, parents and students are invited to come and hear about basically kind of like a high school 101, what high school life is all about, graduation requirements, the program, the academic program, the extracurricular activities, athletics, and the elective course offerings that we have. It's a great night. The counselors also train and work with student leaders and student advisors at each high school. These students work with the 9th grade on the 8th grade and the 9th grade on the transition to high school. And in the summer, those student leaders, with the coordination of the counselors, come in and provide tours at the high school so that the 8th graders can get familiar with the layout of the school and get comfortable with their soon-to-be new environment. In the 9th grade, there's an orientation program that takes place during the summer to help students and parents get a hold of the schedule, get used to what the layout of the high school is, find their classes, know how to work a locker. All of that takes place. The counselors help with all of this. And the freshman transition groups are something that happen in the 9th grade as well with the counselors in small groups and on an individual basis, where they continue that transition to make sure that each and every freshman has had a positive experience and has had a smooth transition from the middle school to the high school. The focus is on helping students be comfortable, successful, reviewing and making sure that they are appropriately placed, and intervening as necessary for students that are experiencing difficulties. Again, I referenced the career exploration program. This predominantly takes place in the 9th grade, even though there are activities that carry through over the course of the 4 years where students are able to use online assessments to help identify interest areas, personality, and such, as I mentioned early on, to help them begin to refine their post-high school plans. This all helps with course selection. Counselors use those tools and use that information with students to help students make the best academic and course decisions, and that goes along with the 4-year planning so students can look ahead and continue to keep focus on what their long-range goals are. And in the 10th grade, we continue on with some of our larger programs. The Do What You Are is the personality assessment, the Myers-Briggs-based assessment that we use with students. All of this can be accessed by parents as well through the Naviance program, which is going to be talked about a little bit later on. Four-year planning meetings continue. We offer AP night in the evening where the curriculum leaders are involved and they have an opportunity to learn about the tremendous course offerings that we have on the college level, the AP level. Course selection continues in the 10th grade. The district the Fairfield schools have hosted a college fair over the last several years in cooperation with some of the other local towns. And there are sophomore class meetings so that counselors have an opportunity to meet with their sophomores, touch base with them, and make sure that they're on track with their long-range plans. Frank's going to take over and carry on with the 11th grade.
Thank you, James. With more than 90% of the students going on to higher education, we spend a lot of time with them with the post-high school planning process. And we've developed a robust program in the Fairfield Public Schools that really begins at the end of sophomore year by formally engaging students and parents in the process through that sophomore meeting. The rubber really hits the road when we get to 11th grade. As you can see from the slide, there's a number of activities that students are encouraged to participate in. 11th graders are encouraged to visit the College and Career Center and hear directly from college representatives background information about schools. They take the PSAT. Right before Thanksgiving, we have Alumni Return Day, where graduates come back and tell us about their successes after Ludlow and after Ward. We also do this for our 12th graders. Serves a slightly different purpose. For 11th graders, it's really to get them excited about the process that's upon them, as well as to engage them in what's their future. We train students on the use of Naviance in terms of the college search process. As Jim mentioned, we have financial aid night. The kickoff, in my opinion, is really that junior or parent program at college night. We have a couple college admissions reps come and give advice on starting the college search. We hand out the post-high school planning book. And then we encourage all students and their parents to make appointments between February and April with their school counselor to do a number of things. Review the transcript, discuss course selection, to refine and revise the list of colleges that they're interested in, as well as a number of other things, including the standardized testing timeline. We have a job shadow day that's available for juniors as an expansion of the Do What You Are program that was done during their sophomore year. As Jim said, we have the college fair, and then a number of students take AP exams in the spring. In 12th grade, we have senior class meetings where we go into classes and talk to students about the second part of the process. For some, it's still the first part of the process, which is college search. The second part is really the application process. We go over the forms with them, we talk about timelines, we answer questions, we encourage them to embrace and take ownership of this process and really be the drivers behind the process from here on out. They do schedule a senior appointment, which is a chance for the counselor to meet with the students to go over the letter of recommendation, look at the updated transcript, again, talk about standardized test scores, refine that list of colleges one more time, and then again, make sure that students know that, that the counselor is always available to help them. College rep visits continue throughout the fall. We have Alumni Return Day again, financial aid night, and then in the spring, it's AP exams and on to awards night the night before graduation. We wanted to take a moment to provide you with some program exemplars, some of the larger programs that are facilitated through the office here. One of the first ones is sometimes mistaken for a type of bottled water that comes from France. If you've heard the term Naviance, that's not a bottled water from France, but it's actually our web-based programs that allow students and parents access to information about all types of programs that are available. We use it during the school day, especially when it comes to the bottom one listed, personality assessment and career exploration. We also have scholarship information listed on there, college visits are listed on there. And maybe one of the more important ones for family, I think, is the admissions data. In the dark ages, when we went to school, in order to get information on a school, you either had to go there, send away for their book that talked about the school, or you actually had to physically go into the College and Career Center at your school and look through the information. And even at that point in time, I think the data that was available was fairly slim. At this point in time, if you want to log onto your machine at 3 o'clock in the morning and access all this information, you can do that. You no longer have to go into the College and Career Center. You can do it morning, noon, and night from the comfort of your own home. Another program that we're very proud to offer through Fairfield Public Schools is the NAMES program. Names can really hurt us. It's been offered twice at Fairfield Ward High School and for the first time last year at Fairfield Ludlow High School. This is sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League. It's a program about diversity, respect, and tolerance. Their staff members come in and train a small cadre of students and staff members who in turn facilitate a program to the student body at large by grade level. It's one of the most powerful programs that we have at the school. It really speaks to the strength of the student body, their maturity, and their ability to handle some very difficult topics in front of their peers at this age. And we're very proud of them at the conclusion of this program, and I can say that it has made a difference in the culture of our schools. And the last one that we wanted to mention is the Fairfield Regional College Fair. It's hosted by Ludlow, Ward, Notre Dame, Prep, and we also include Staples and Trumbull. This is an opportunity for students, whether they're looking at a 4-year program, a 2-year program, community college, the service, work, gap year. It's a chance for them to firsthand find out information from representatives of those programs. We encourage all juniors to attend. And it occurs in the spring. April 6th will be the date this year. And again, another chance for them to get engaged and involved in the process. One of the things that we wanted to point out was some information regarding college admissions. Barron's Guide is a national publication that produces unbiased information about colleges and universities across the United States. One of the features that it has is an admissions selector that categorizes colleges according to standardized test scores and grade point average. And if you look, the categories are on the left, listed on the left-hand side, starting with most competitive. Again, nationally, students who attend these schools earn between 655 and 800 on one portion of the SAT. And in general, their grade point average is between an A and a B+. And then as you go on down the list, you'll see that the standardized test scores and grade point averages start to go down. At the very bottom, there's also some special schools that accept students based on talent in the fine arts. For example, RISD would be one of those. We have students who attend colleges in all of these categories, but looking at the top 3, the most competitive ones, here's a sampling of where students have matriculated in the past years from both Fairfield Ludlow as well as Fairfield Ward. And to give you an idea just of maybe how things have changed a little bit in the scene of college admissions, for example, let's just take Holy Cross. Your standardized test score may be between a 655 and 800, and you may have between an A and a B+, and you may have all the other credentials that this school is looking for. However, last year more than 7,000 students applied to Holy Cross, and I would guess that the overwhelming majority of them had met those qualifications. However, Holy Cross didn't have the space to accommodate those students. They only accepted 2,300 students, which was about a 33% admit rate. Another example, maybe on the most competitive side, would be Harvard. Last year, 23,000 students applied. Approximately 2,100 were admitted, which was a 9% admit rate. However, these schools recognize that students from Fairfield Ludlow and Fairfield Ward have a lot more to contribute to their school environment, not just academically, but socially, athletically, intramurals, music-wise, and we've had a lot of success. Students have a lot of success in getting into these schools. The next level would be what Barron's calls highly competitive schools. You may recognize some names there. And again, an example of just how things have been a little bit different in this day and age. Taking Northeastern as an example, last year, 39,000 applications. 39,000. Only 12,000 were accepted. It's a 39% admit rate. University of Michigan, 27,000 applicants, and they accepted about 14,000 last year, which was 50%. And then finally, very competitive. Again, one of the top three that we're talking about here. If you add these three together, highly competitive, most competitive, and very competitive, almost 60% of our students matriculated these schools every year. We're very proud of the program that we've developed and that we continue to improve as the years progress. We're even more proud of our students and what they've done to make the Fairfield Public School System a very notable school system to graduate from. And so I don't want you to just take my word or Jim's word on the program that we developed. I want you to hear a little bit from the experts. And the experts are the end users, the students. Here's some things that they've said about the programs that we offer. I love my guidance counselor, not just for help, but more importantly, just stopping by to talk. Everyone in this school, from the Career Center to guidance, were amazing. So much gratitude. Thank you. Guidance department, I appreciate you guys. Have a nice summer. Here's some things the parents have said. My child's counselor has been wonderfully supportive and has developed a good relationship with my child. My daughter feels totally comfortable with her counselor. And that, in essence, is, I think, what we're trying to establish here, a rapport, a relationship that will allow students to walk in at any time, or parents to contact at any time, and assist with adolescents. My child's counselor has been a wonderful advocate for him. I could not have asked for more. Strong college placement, personality fit, knowledge. We're grateful and appreciative of all the time, care, and support our daughter has received from guidance office throughout her 4 years. You do not need to pay a college advisor to help with admission. The counseling staff here is wonderful, and there is software to help. The Career Center here is amazing. Much of the information you need is here. And finally, Ludlow at this point has the luxury of drawing from the NEASC report. Fairfield Board recently had their visit and does not have their report back yet. But in the Ludlow visit, there were several notable citations. Fairfield Ludlow's Guidance Department, in conjunction with the Counseling and Career Center's personnel, provides an extensive range of services for students under the umbrella of a comprehensive school counseling program. With a systematic approach for meeting student needs, school counselors are at the crux of all individual counseling experiences of students. Overall, Ludlow counselors deliver a comprehensive, full-service developmental school counseling program designed to meet the diverse needs of all students. Teachers report quick responses from school counselors when a concern is brought to their attention. They work together with the teacher for resolution of the issue at hand, providing valuable insights and support. Parents, too, report a confidence with the strengths of the counselors in their work with students on a variety of areas, from college and career exploration to dealing with personal and social problems. Fairfield Ludlow is commended on the following points as it pertains to the counseling services: an optimal counselor-to-student ratio, varied services provided by school counselors in both individual and group settings, informational parent nights and methods for communicating with parents, school and community resources that are available to provide comprehensive student support services. And we'll end with a quote, I think, that summarizes our presentation tonight. Today's school counselors are vital members of the education team. They help all students in the areas of academic achievement, personal and social development, and career development, ensuring today's students become the productive, well-adjusted adults of tomorrow. Thank you.
Well, at the very least, just a wonderful job, and thank you very much. I think one of the parents said to me before we did a gratitude, and we certainly do. Mrs. On?
Thank you, and thank you again for the presentation. For those of you who don't have students in the high school, the programs that were listed at every level are so instrumental and in helping our students in all the years, and I do thank you for that. I have one question. What is the approximate caseload of the guidance counselor at the high school.
At Ward, we're approximately 150.
In Ludlow, it's about 160.
Thank you. And this goes back to, I guess, since we're getting into budget season, this is a reason why I think they should go back to 10.5 month work schedule, just so everybody at the board table knows. We did cut them a week last year, and you see the vital role that they play in our students. It's not just, and they take the student beginning to end, you know, through every part of their academic life, and it's very vital that we keep them in that capacity. So thank you.
I actually had the same, can you hear me? I had the same question. I just wanted to know what the ratio was. So it's 150 for Ward and 160 for Ludlow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just as a student, I've been through this entire counseling program, and I've done all those activities on there, and really the strength of the counseling program at Ludlow, and I'm sure at Ward too, it's been great, and really I've had such a positive experience with my guidance counselor through all the college process and picking out my schedule and everything, so just thank you.
Mr. Carey?
Just one brief question. I see we have a very strong focus, obviously, on college and getting into college, but we do have a percentage of students that don't go on to college. And not to reference, don't want to talk about, well, back in the early 80s, it was, you know, shop and auto shop. Do we have something for skilled trades to drive or help students get into plumbing, electricians, carpenters? Is there anything in terms of when we're counseling them that can assist them to getting into those trades if they're not going to go on to college? They're higher paying?
Higher paying being the key word. I think that, again, if you look at what we tried to present tonight, the program tries to meet the needs of all students. That's challenging when 75% of the student body is going on to four-year college. We try to embed, if at all possible, in any of the large group presentations, small group presentations, but I would say mostly on an individual basis. The school counselors work very closely with students on selecting courses in the elective areas that we do offer. We don't have courses in plumbing, but we do have strong courses in the technology and woodworking and graphic design and that sort of thing. And we do have relationships with not only folks at the four-year schools and two-year schools, but at specialty schools, aviation, if you will, or art schools. So we do have the opportunity on an individual basis to try to guide students to those special programs that aren't quite out there and as popular among the student body. But again, I think we do a good job of meeting the needs of students and accessing those different types of resources and programs that are out there in the community or in other parts of the state. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Some of that work is done more on an individual basis. There are internship opportunities available for those students to explore potential career areas of interest that may be non-traditional. We also sponsor trips to Stratford Aviation, as Jim had mentioned, Porter and Chester Institute. And we also bring people into the school to discuss other opportunities for them, whether by bringing their classes up to the College and Career Center, the Tech Ed classes, to speak with these people, or even just offering something for them, say on college night, that will meet their needs.
Any other questions from the board? No? Again, I did have actually one question, if I may. I think it's similar to what Mr. Carey was talking about, but what you gave us this evening is just a portion of what you do. It isn't all of what you do. I know that you also have internship programs, I believe, at both schools, which I think in part where Mr. Carey was coming from gives students some practical knowledge. Would you mind speaking to that just briefly, please?
Sure. At Ward, we have taken a different approach to the internship opportunity. Our internship program right now, as it stands, is done through a career exploration class taught through the business department. The current enrollment in that course is about 13 students. It's a curriculum-based internship program where students have about a quarter, it's a semester course, so 1/4 of that course is really preparation, resume writing, how to approach a job site, a work site, and the two teachers that co-teach that course work with our Career Center person on finding sites for the students to go out on internship opportunities. In addition, we are piloting a job shadowing program this year for our juniors to have an opportunity to get out into different work sites for a day to start to explore the different careers that they might be interested in, just to get a flavor for whether or not they like being an accountant or being in a doctor's office or an attorney's office or what have you. So that's our approach at Ward. We have begun some discussions with parent groups and student groups at Ward to talk about how we might broaden that, approach that differently. We're not just looking at internships as a way of all seniors to have sort of a capstone experience. We're open to exploring other types of opportunities for seniors to have, senior projects, what have you. So we look at it a little bit differently than Ludlow. I know has a very vibrant program, and Frank can talk about that.
The internship program at Fairfield Ludlow High School is called Senior Internship. This is the 4th year that we'll be offering the program. It's grown in popularity over the years. It started out with 34 students and has grown to last year 188 students who spent the last about 4 weeks of their high school career in a community internship. They finish their coursework right after their AP exams conclude and spend between 25 and 35 hours per week in an internship. They have a faculty member that works with them. It provides a unique educational experience for them, gives them the opportunity to apply the knowledge and skills that they've learned through their public education to give back to the community. They found it to be an extremely valuable experience for them for a number of reasons. Number one, I think, is that it gives them a chance to test drive, so to speak, a potential career area of interest before they spend a couple $100,000 pursuing a degree in a certain area. I know a number of students who have earned positions after the internship is done. It's a non-paid opportunity, but a number of students get summer employment. They come back during their college break and they have work, and they've really spoken highly about it, again, the growth of it. And it's also, I think, a chance for Fairfield Ludlow to share with the community the great student resources that we have here. We get extremely positive feedback from the people who commit to taking on a student for that length of time. And our students aren't there just to photocopy, answer the phone, and drink coffee. They're actually engaged in the work. They're going to the courthouse. They're working at places like UBS Financial Services, Maritime Aquarium, the whole range, automotive shops. And it's really been a fabulous experience. And right now the applications are out, and we'll see if we break the 200 mark.
I just have a follow-up on that. You've been doing it for 4 years. It sounds like an incredible program. Is that something that Ward is looking to adopt or move towards? I guess with all the emphasis on 2 equal high schools, why don't we offer this type of thing at Ward?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, our approach to the senior internship has been a little bit different in that we offer it through a curriculum-based course that students take part in. And we would like the ability to explore different opportunities with our students to have a capstone experience. The internship is one way. That's a way that Ludlow wanted to go in. It's certainly a vibrant program. We are in discussion right now with some parent groups and some student groups exploring that as one option, but not the only option for students to have a different kind of senior year experience.
Any further questions from the board? And thank you both very much. Really wonderful job.
I I just want to thank the school counselors here. If you guys wouldn't mind standing up one more time, they're the ones that really deserve the thank you.
Now, as we move on, we do have another presentation of adolescent decision-making project.
Good evening. I'm just going to do some introductions. This is a proposal. As you know, board policy requires that the board vote on any research project that includes our students. So this is a research project that we are going to ask you to support. It's an exciting opportunity for the Fairfield Public Schools, staff, students, and families to participate in research around adolescent decision-making and students with disabilities. So I'm going to introduce Barbara Giaquinto, our secondary coordinator, and she will introduce the staff from Columbia University, and we'll be here to answer any questions you have. Okay?
Good evening. I'd like to introduce Dr. Linda Hickson, who is the principal investigator for this project through Columbia University. As you all know, we're charged with looking at scientifically based research and intervention to help our students with disabilities, and an area of particular concern is in the area of decision making. There aren't any curriculum out there that have science or research behind them. And I was introduced to Dr. Hickson through my own coursework at Columbia, and they've been working with adults with disabilities in the area of decision making, and really have offered to help us kind of create, I'll let them explain more, a curriculum for adolescents, which is a significant need that we're facing. I'll let them explain to you the process that they want to take us through. We've had this opportunity, and it is a need, so we're excited to have them present this to you tonight. And I will open this up with Dr. Linda Hickson.
Hi, thank you very much for taking the time to consider our proposal. First of all, I'd like to introduce us. Well, as you know, I'm a professor at Teachers College at Columbia University, and I coordinate doctoral and master's programs in intellectual disability and autism. And and I also direct the Center for Opportunities and Outcomes for People with Disabilities. And so we've been working in the decision-making area for at least the past 15 years. We've developed curriculum materials for adults, done also a number of studies with adolescents. So we're really here tonight to ask you to work along with us to do some assessments to better understand how adolescent students with intellectual disabilities and autism make decisions, how they approach situations, and then also to use what we learn to design an intervention that will hopefully provide them with some strategies to help them make decisions more effectively in situations that they face. But first of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Ruth Zeeland, who is chair of the education department at the College of New Rochelle, and Amanda Mason, who's an advanced doctoral student at Teachers College, who has played a major role in our teacher preparation master's program. Amanda teaches the methods course in intellectual disabilities, autism, and she also supervises student teachers. She's been a research fellow in the research center, so she will be serving as field coordinator for this project. And if you give your approval, we would be coming to work with the students with other doctoral and master's students in this program. So everybody has a really, I think, good background for working with the students, and would be very, very interested in coming to learn as much as we can and try to, come up with some tools that would be helpful to the students. Many of you, I believe, have our proposal, and so you know that we outlined it in terms of 5 phases, and actually only phases 2, 3, and 4 constitute the research part of the project. Phase 1 has already happened. It really wasn't research, but we were invited to come to a professional development day on November 3rd. And on that day, we got to meet a number of staff members across the age levels of the school and had some informal focus group meetings with them where we came with some of our questions about what are the needs of your students and what do you think might be helpful. And we learned a lot from them. I think one of the things that we learned is that we're generally on the same wavelength in terms of the types of situations that adolescents find challenging. And also we got the sense from them that in fact it would be helpful if we could develop a structured tool for the adolescents to use when they're out in the community having to make all kinds of decisions with really important consequences. And then jumping ahead to phase 5, and it would be after we did the research phases, then we would like to come back in the spring and meet with staff again to share with staff whatever we've learned and work with them on how to work those strategies into the existing program. So, onto the research phase. The first phase would be to do pre-testing with the adolescents. So we've gotten input from staff. We think by giving our battery of pre-tests that relate to decision making, we could get a good sense of where your adolescents with intellectual disabilities and autism actually are in terms of making decisions so that we could tailor the intervention to meet their specific needs. And after pre-testing, the next phase would be to actually randomly assign some adolescents to receive a 6-session intervention, and the other students wouldn't receive the intervention immediately, but the plan is that once we find out whether this intervention is effective and which aspects of it are effective, then we will work with staff to make sure the students who had been assigned to the control group received all effective aspects of the intervention by the end of the school year. So hopefully by the end of the school year we'll all be on the same page. All adolescents will have had access to the intervention and will be working with staff to continue to get their feedback and their sense of how what we develop might be useful to you in your program. We also actually are hoping to add a parent piece to it. We submitted a little grant proposal a few weeks ago, hoping that if all of this goes well, then maybe at some later stage there might be a parent component too, where we would get parent input and work with them on strategies. So I guess people would be interested in the details of the consent process. We would send letters describing the project home to parents and ask them if they would agree to have their son or daughter participate in the project. And then if parents agree, then we have a participant consent form, and we would come and we would meet with the students themselves and describe the projects to them and then ask them if they would like to participate. So even if parents agree, students could still decide that they don't want to participate. So, or if they did decide to participate, they could actually stop participating at any point that they wanted to. So we don't want anyone to be, forced into being part of it, although mostly students that we've worked with enjoy being part of it. We work in small groups of 3 or 4 students, and the activities that we've designed are designed usually to be really interactive and really interesting and engaging. And I guess to just back up and maybe focus a little bit on the intervention. In our experiences, we find that as adolescents with disabilities are having more opportunities to be included and to be independent in the community and to interact with their peers, it also means they're facing a lot of challenging situations on their own that have to do with peer relationships, sometimes peer pressure, and personal decisions that they have to make. And so our focus has been on, well then, when they're making these decisions, where do they experience difficulty making the decisions, and are there things that we could teach them that would better prepare them to deal with these situations more effectively and in ways that they don't sometimes get into situations that they wouldn't want to be in. And so in our work with decision making, we've teased out a number of components of a decision-making situation, and typically one phase is sizing up the situation, figuring out whether there's a problem or not, and kind of what kind of situation it is. And then another stage is thinking, well, are there different ways that I can handle this situation? So generating alternatives, but then another really important part is being aware of goals and being aware that also that there is something you can do to maybe try to change the situation or try to have it lead to a better outcome. Some of the students we've worked with don't really even realize that there's something they might be able to do to change the situation or influence the outcome. Sometimes they feel that when someone is urging them to do something, they kind of need to go along with it. So part of it is encouraging them to stop and think and realize that they can, in fact, act. And then at the same time, focusing in on possible goals in situations, because sometimes goals are competing with each other, like a goal to be safe or a goal to fulfill your responsibilities to doing homework, or a family responsibility might actually be in competition with a goal to please a friend or to have friends or be popular. And so part of it would be working on goal priorities. Also, part of it would be differentiating between healthy, positive friendships and relationship interactions, and differentiating between those and situations where there's peer pressure that might not be positive, or friends that might be not acting in the student's best interest. So we would sort of provide that context, and we use a lot of hypothetical situations, but we would be very open to input from your staff and to designing interventions that would really be compatible with the program that you already have now. So I think I should probably stop and entertain questions that you might have. Thank you.
More questions? Mrs. Hunt?
Thank you. Which age groups are we talking about here?
We're talking about 15 through 21, so the older age group, although in the focus groups, there were suggestions that we should maybe start younger, so that would be a next step.
And also, the sessions are about 30 to 45 minutes?
Yes.
And will take place during what part of the day? What is the rest of the class doing while this group is in their small groups?
Right. In the for the pre and post assessments, we would work with students one at a time in an interview situation. And for the small group intervention, that's where we would need to work really, really closely with staff to figure out how to schedule it in a way that it wasn't disruptive.
So they weren't missing any curriculum time and stuff?
Right. So we would really work closely to figure that out.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Back?
Thank you. How many students are you thinking of working with, or what's your target number for both the ones that you're going to do the research with and then the ones in the control room?
Right. Our overall target number for the study would be about 60, but we don't know if you'll have that many eligible students or if that many parents will consent. So I think we're really open to working along with whoever's interested in participating, and then I guess we would just keep building that information as we go along.
Excuse me, do you have a rough timeline that you have in mind with this, so that when you actually would have some results that, quite frankly, really that would help us with our students?
We do. Our hope was to be able to do the intervention phase in February and March and do the post-testing in April, so that we would have at least some preliminary findings in order to do some staff development in May and share the findings with you all.
Yeah, I actually was thinking more in terms of pieces that not just this school district, but anyone would be able to incorporate into their curriculum. Yeah, I understand you'd have your personal results, but I was looking to see if something that could be standardized from this.
Yes, I mean, I think that could take, I mean, we would have a preliminary version of the tool that that staff may want to then be trying out too and be in interaction with us. I mean, we're hoping this year will go so well that you'll want to keep working with us and we can keep fine-tuning and developing it. But we believe that by the end of this year we'll be able to leave you with at least a preliminary version of a tool to work with.
Mr. Miller?
Oh, I'm sorry. Just one quick question. I presume since target age is 15 to 21, then it would be both high schools that you'd be operating a program on, and that you've had staff development already on November 3rd, then with teachers from both high schools? So it would be going on simultaneously then?
Turn to Barbara on that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you done this in any other schools yet? And why did you choose Fairfield?
Well, because we were hearing from Barbara what a terrific place it would be to do a project like this. And we have done some work in New Rochelle and also White Plains, and also some of the New York City public schools.
Mr. Carey?
Do you envision our staff participating with you in the intervention process collaboratively, or that's the first part of the question?
Yes, we're open to whatever type of relationship makes sense for your staff. I mean, our graduate students will come to do the small group training sessions, so we won't be asking your staff to do that. But when we get to the professional development phase, we'll be happy to work with you to figure out what would be feasible for your staff and what would fit into your staff needs. I mean, we're hoping to come up with a tool that would be useful and fit into the structure of what your staff already does, whether it be teachers or guidance staff or other staff.
And in terms of the decision-making processes that you're concerned about in particular, can you give us an example of the type of role play that you would do in this situation?
We usually kind of break down the components in the intervention sessions so that there are some initial sessions that focus on differences between healthy and unhealthy friendships, goal clarification, goal priorities, but eventually we work up to teaching a strategy that has steps, like is there a problem, and then what are my options, and then how would those options meet my goals, and then if I do each of these things, what are the possible consequences? So what could happen if I pursue each of my options? And we usually use a visual chart that then the students would have like a small version of the visual chart to cue them. And then in the end, what's the best decision I could make in this situation? And so we try really hard not to steer them toward rote decisions, but to get them to look at each individual situation. And kind of just being aware that in adolescence, I mean, they often are kind of out there in situations at parties and things where they really have to make serious decisions with serious consequences. So we're hoping they can be as well equipped to do that as possible.
I have two other questions, Mrs. Brand,
If we can do it to wrap it up, because
since Dr. Clark's not here, but just it's probably more for our staff than this team, would be, one, is there a cost to the district for us to participate in this? And the second, has our staff talked to SEPTA about this program, and is there a sense of that organization in terms of this particular proposal?
Thank you very much.
I snuck into this.
No.
Sorry, don't want to jump in. Sorry. There is no cost to the proposal, which makes it just doubly great. But in terms of SEPTA, I did not bring it to the SEPTA Executive Board prior to the board because I felt like the protocol was to come before the board with research before we proposed it to the parent population. So I did not take it to the SEPTA Executive Board. When it became part of the board agenda, I did have some conversation with the SEPTA president, who shared it with some folks, and different parents have communicated with me across the day. It is my fault. I just made a decision that I felt the protocol was to come before the Board of Education with research suggestions before I took it out to the community. So if there's any, that's really a mea culpa.
Thank you. Excuse me, Mr. Mattila?
I don't think you have to apologize because we're the elected Board of Education. It's a decision we have to make. So this board member doesn't think you need to apologize. But obviously you will communicate with SEPTA
Absolutely. That would be the next step. Once
Today.
we get your approval, would be to go before the SEPTA Executive Board and then start to talk to the parents of the students who would have to give their permission to the program.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Dowling, am I in the right order, Mr. Liu?
Just a quick comment to kind of tag there with Andrea. As being the board of ed liaison to SEPTA, I did have a chance once now, it was on the agenda and it was out there then over the weekend. I had a chance to talk to a couple SEPTA parents today and they were very excited about this possibility and were encouraging us to go in favor of it.
Mr. Liu, and I think then we're going to wrap it up.
So how does this work in terms of moving on to the future? This is a test project, is that correct? And you've worked on it with other different schools and other different places. At what point, I mean, I don't know anything about these things, does the research is complete and you say, all right, now we have a program. You talked about coming back in the future. Would that be with a complete program? At that point, would it cost something? All right,
Yeah, we did eventually, after many years of research with adults, develop a curriculum called Escape, which was a decision-making curriculum aimed at abuse prevention with adults with developmental disabilities. And one thing led to another. We did get a series of grants. We developed some staff training materials. And now it's a package that we can send out free of charge. We ended up getting a grant from the New York State Developmental Disabilities Planning Council, and so it's now in CD and DVD, a staff training DVD form that we can just send out. So we're not looking to ever have it cost anything, and we are just kind of really wanting to develop materials that could be helpful that we would happily share with you. And I think what happens as time goes on, I mean, first of all, we'll do the evaluation, and if it's highly effective in all of its parts right now, great, then we've got something we're going with. But if it isn't, we would really like to keep working with you to redesign and fine-tune it until it is effective. And then we would share what we've learned. But what tends to evolve over time is kind of like a neater set of materials that are more easily usable by staff. And the preliminary phase might not look as neatly packaged as eventually we would hope to get it.
Mr. Badeby, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'll try to be very quick. It indicates in this document that consent forms will be provided to staff to distribute to parents and guardians. Are you going to help the staff identify the students that may benefit from this study at all? Or are you going to rely on the staff to identify? How are you going to do that?
Yeah.
It will be our job to communicate with the families because we can't release names and personally identifiable information. We have confidentiality obligations to our kids. So our job will be to communicate with the students' families, the parents, whose students meet the parameters of the study. We will communicate with them. We will invite them to come to an event to hear about the study, be able to ask questions, and then we'll go that would be the route we would take with people. But we can't provide names to Columbia until we have parent permission to do so.
I realize that. You're telling me to identify as using their name. At some point, you get another name when you identify.
When the parent gives permission, right? When they come to the meeting.
Okay. That was my question.
Okay, folks, at this time I will entertain a motion, a recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the adolescent decision-making project. Do I have? There will be. We're not there yet. There will be. I'm sorry. Moved by Mr. Matillo, seconded by Mrs. Dow. Any board discussion? I think we've probably done. Now, public comment. We do invite you to speak, please. Come to the podium. We will ask that people limit their address to the board to 2 minutes. Mrs. Dyer is pretty much within your line of sight, and she will flag us as well as you when your time limit is up.
Hi, Richard Johnson. I'm a Carriage Drive resident of Southport. I have experience with autism, and I'm just curious if I could pose a question directly to the presenters. Social cognition and social pragmatics are obviously a huge concern for kids with autism because they really are very literal, and many times you teach kids in a test tube, but the real rubber hits the road when you're in a live C2 decision-making process. I've heard a lot about the serious consequences of decision-making. Will any of this decision-making and this testing and intervention be in a real-life environment with the kids in a natural setting outside the classroom? Thanks.
Not those format actions to have people come to the podium. Sorry.
Good evening, Charlotte Leslie, Hunter Road. I think this is a very interesting project, but I really, and I appreciate you guys bringing up SEPTA, because SEPTA is in Fairfield, one of the strongest SEPTAs in the state of Connecticut, so I think it is paramount that you guys do a presentation to the parents, since this is your group, they have to have the buy-in, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Corinne Kennelly from Flintlock Road in Southport, and I'm a parent of a 9th grader with special needs, and I think this is a fabulous idea and really one that kind of, we just heard from the counseling department, and they said they were worrying about survival and safety skills. I think this is one thing that is not at all addressed with our kids, and it's dangerous out there, and they really need this. So I would be kind of like the SEPTA member who says, go for it. I think this is wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Olin of Nunnapogue Road, and I also have a daughter with special needs in the district. And I actually, first of all, for the SEPTA thing, it should not just be to the executive board, it should be to the general membership. Also, this type of curriculum is completely absent. I spoke, an advocate friend of mine asked me to come and give her point of view, which is that all over Connecticut, this is a missing element. We teach social skills, we teach, speech pragmatics, as Richard said, and kind of personal safety skills. If you look at the vast majority of, sexual assaults on people with disabilities, they happen by someone who is close to them. And if you can just develop some of the decision-making tools that can help people find this out, if it only helped 1 kid or 10 kids, that would be worth the investment, which we're very lucky is, free. My question would be to the presenters is, I understand it's going to be for 15 to 21. There are foundational skills that younger children can use in the realm of personal safety, and I would like to understand if this program can be kind of backward engineered to help younger kids as well.
We have the next person. Did you want to address the board?
Hello, my name is Kathy Finlaw. I live on North Benson Road, and I have a daughter, an 8-year-old daughter with an intellectual disability, and I asked the board tonight to please strongly endorse this program. I have done a little research. I've looked at Project Escape, and it's fabulous. And I am on the executive board of SEPTA, and I have spoken to many members of SEPTA, and we are very excited about this program. As Jessica Olin stated, this is not addressed in the curriculum for our children. There are many things that the district does take care of for our kids in terms of their social skills, social pragmatics. Our children are vulnerable to strangers, to personal safety, to sexual abuse. And here, this program helps with, it provides a foundation, and this program will weave in through the curriculum and give our kids just the tools to handle and to make good decisions. And I strongly ask you tonight to please move forward on this curriculum.
Is there any other further public comment? Hearing none, then I will bring it back to the board, and is the board ready for a vote? Mrs. Conlon, would you just be kind enough to read the motion once again?
Sure. The Board of Education approved the Adolescent Decision-Making Project.
Do I have a first? I'll beg your pardon. All in favor, please? It passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and thanks to you both. The next item on the agenda is proposal for revision of high school credits.
This was something that was discussed by the policy committee. I don't know if Mrs. Zahn or Mr. Boyle would like to take the lead on this.
No, it's in the packets. We discussed it the last meeting.
The proposal was actually generated through the joint leadership team, and the proposal is set up to provide consistency for courses in terms of credits and time allocation. Upon investigation, there were about 12 courses that really provided inconsistent credit, and they're listed in the back of enclosure number 3, and the rationale for the proposal is listed on the front. Mr. Tato and Mr. Perna are very closely involved in this, and if you have really specific questions, they can help answer them. Otherwise, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Is there any questions from the board? Mr. Becky?
I just have a real, quick question. I guess I read through this and I understand the proportion about certain classroom hours versus credit hours. Is there any consideration given to courses that may require work outside the classroom hours that may be more extensive and therefore have a certain different proportion of credit afforded to that class that may have a lot of work outside of classroom hours? Or is that a consideration at all, not a consideration, or how does that work?
That has not been a consideration for this proposal. It's primarily seat time in classrooms, in school, and not necessarily consideration for any outside requirements or coursework.
Are any of the credit hours that are given in different courses, is that ever taken into consideration, or are they all the courses that are have credit are always considered classroom?
Classroom courses.
All right. Thank you.
Seeing none, then our next thing on the agenda is the first read of policy number 5225, requirements for graduation. Dr. Clark or Mrs. Zahn or Mr. Burke?
Well, this is something that we needed to do when we approved the high school, the change in the social studies requirements to 3.5 years. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Mr. Boyle.
Actually, this is the first reading of the policy, and although the high school social studies component will not be approved until the January meeting, but we'll be consistent with that. So we wanted to get this so that it would be in the program studies and approved for second read in January. There are 2 issues, the 7 credits in social studies, as well as the credits for physical education.
This will help you with scheduling and you're on track.
Pardon?
This will help you with your scheduling to keep program of studies to help you with that.
Absolutely.
And the next thing we have is preliminary budget discussion from Dr. Clark. Thank you very much.
The central office team has been meeting with administrators to discuss what we believe should be our recommended priorities to you. We've spent a lot of work to date, and unfortunately, because of the fact that it's only December 8th, we do not have a lot of hard numbers for you, but we would like to discuss what our priorities are with you. And if any of them are not priorities for the Board of Education, it would help us if you would tell us that now, so that we don't move forward with a lot of work to have you say, we agree, but not this year. We have moved forward costs that we must maintain. Our priority in staffing is that there would be no reduction of student programs. We would like to offer the same programs next year that we're offering this year. Transportation, we are moving into year 3 of the contract, and because of the increased enrollment at the middle school, we are requesting an additional 4 buses. We expect an increase in utilities. To date, Mrs. McQueen believes the increase will be $238,000. We are expecting an extremely large increase in our expenses for medical benefits. Social Security will stay flat, we think, because many of our new employees are opting for the alternative program. However, our pension contribution to the town is expected to increase. We have been told to expect that our reimbursement from the state for special education will go down, that it may go down as much as 30%. And at the same time, because of the economy, all of our contracted services costs are likely to increase. Those are the move forward costs that we believe, some by law, for example, Social Security, others by contract medical benefits, we have to continue to have these. Our priority also is to maintain our class size guidelines at the elementary level, and we have to honor the contractual loads at the middle and the high school. You will see that reflected in the budget, particularly at the middle and the high school, with an increase in enrollment and the way the student numbers break out. If we're going to maintain the team structure at the middle schools, you'll remember in the budget last year we had to make adjustments at Tomlinson. This year we're going to have to make adjustments at Fairfield Woods and Roger Ludlow Middle School, and that will come to you in terms of staffing. But we believe our middle school students benefit from being on teams, and we need to continue that. That's a priority for us. We used to call this the long-range strategic plan, but we're now going into year 3, so we're now calling it the strategic plan. All of the groups have been working very actively this year. You've been getting reports from Dr. Rosado. Most of the committees are trying not to spend any money and still meet their goals. You will see recommendations for maintenance and technology as part of the budget. They're covered under the strategic plan. They're also in the long-range facilities plan and in the technology plan. These are 2 areas where we have made major deferments for 3 years. And we believe when we bring you our list in both maintenance and technology, we will highlight the priority areas for you. Some in maintenance involve safety, and some are preventive maintenance that we haven't done now for 3 years. The high school schedule is a priority of ours. We would like to increase instructional time and provide a lunch period for all students. And after I've gone through the list, Mr. Coyne and Mr. Ebling are here if you have specific questions. You've received a memo about the high school schedule. You also received a memo about the Osborne Hill School population needs. We believe this should be a priority of ours. We anticipate next year they will have 563 students. And Mr. Lippman is also here if you have questions about that. We expect an additional 129 students next year. As I said before, we want to hold the line in our programs, technology, and maintenance. And we mentioned the cost of transportation. You will see we're not, except for the high school schedule, which isn't really a new program, but a new way of delivering our program, we're not recommending any new programs or changes to programs. We are aware of the economy. However, last year we gave back $750,000 that we needed. We held the line on a lot of capital outlay, on supplies, on maintenance and technology. This year our budget is at minus 0.04 with an increase of over 100 students and an increased contribution to the pension fund. The first selectman has asked that we come in with a 0% budget, and we know medical expenses, utilities, pension contribution are going up, enrollment is going up. So we would like feedback from you as to whether or not you support these priorities, ones that you don't, ones that you understand, ones that you have questions about, because we're about to begin the difficult work of putting this together in a way that would make sense to you and also to the other town bodies.
Thank you, Ashley, so much, Dr. Clark. I know this was early. We don't normally have this discussion at the board table this soon. And I can't thank you enough, and I know the board members share in that this is very helpful as we move forward so the town has a sense of our predicament. If board members have questions, and also I would like board members, if possible, please to give Dr. Clark some direction in terms of their priorities as well. Mr. Mottola?
I, for the most part, agree with all these priorities, maintaining elementary class size guidelines and contractual loads, the strategic plan, and I wasn't sure what I know what you were talking about there, but I see that it's really related to facilities and technology. Our committee met last week and we made some recommendations. I'll let Mr. Carey talk about that in a few minutes. I am absolutely in favor of the high school schedule increase in the instructional time. What I'm having a very difficult problem with is asking the town to spend $3 million to expand the cafeterias to provide for a lunch period. And well, what I would ask, and I think some other board members might ask, is whether or not, with respect to the instructional time proposal that I guess we looked at a year or so ago, if there's some way it can be tweaked to try to get a fourth lunch period in the day, and that might mean that instead of approximately 60 minutes a class period, that you may be shortening it by 4 or 5 minutes to see if you can get some time. I'm not sure if you can do that, but it's my sense that there's actually no realistic way that the town's going to spend $3 million to bump out our cafeterias and to do this, just because of the economic times that we have. So I would ask the administration to take a hard look at this high school schedule. I want to increase the instructional time. We still think we can do it. If there's a way to tweak it in some manner where maybe we're not getting as much as we thought, but we're still getting more instructional time. I mean, the reason why, and Mr. Carey and Mr. Liu and I discussed this a week ago, and I think some other board members in their committee meetings discussed this, and I'm dating myself, but there was a time when I went to Ludlow, and the cafeteria is essentially the same size, and we had 4 lunch periods, and we had 1,600 students in the school. And I don't recall ever having a problem getting a lunch in the 20-minute period, 25-minute period that we had to eat. So I think that was kind of the thought. Mr. Carey's nodding his head that it was something that was done 20 plus 30 years ago. That's a long time ago. And I usually don't like to compare 30 years ago to today, but we still generally eat the same. Well, maybe we don't eat exactly the same foods, but the concept of eating hasn't really changed in 30 years. So that's the problem I have with that. It's hard for me to talk. I mean, I support all of this. The thing that really stuck out was the high school schedule, $3 million. That was a problem for me. It's hard for me to talk about the rest of these kind of in a vacuum because I don't know what the number is yet. So, I mean, obviously, I might change my mind in January. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Mrs. Ackman?
Sorry, that's okay. I guess, how do you want to do this, Mrs. Brand? I mean, I have. Do you want to just stick with the high school schedule and stay on that and then move to the next item?
Actually, what I would like to do is actually have board members please direct their priorities to Dr. Clark. I think the subcommittees actually did work and broke pieces of this. So right now, I think with what Dr. Clark has presented, I think we need to just give our priorities based on what we've seen and heard, and then when we go to subcommittees, I think we will get into a little bit more of the detail that Mr. Matola was referring to. Thank you.
Well, I guess, just to follow up then on what Mr. Matola said, I need to understand more about the lunch hour, and if, I would like, if there's somebody's prepared to speak about that tonight, then I would like to hear from
Thank you.
them.
May I ask Mr. Coyne and Mr. Edlin to address why, if we did change the schedule, it would be very difficult to have the 4 lunch waves? And given the current schedule, why it's difficult for all students to have a lunch period, or at least to have 5? And I'd like to let them sit at this table. if that's okay.
Actually, yeah.
We sit together. You can stay. Okay. You want this one? No, that's.
I'm trying to think of a, of a quick way to address the question. And if I understood you properly a few minutes ago, John Matola's question had to do with why can't it be 4 lunch waves like you experienced a number of years ago? Why it couldn't be a similar schedule?
I guess my question is there a way to keep the concept that you've studied for at least 2 or 3 years now, but instead of 57 minutes for a period, it's 54 minutes, and you gain some time? That's just my thought process. You gain time by reducing it from 57 to 54 or whatever to see if you could squeeze in an additional period so we could fit the kids in there. That's what I'm thinking, and maybe it's not possible, but that was my thought.
Mr. Coyne, I think that the board, my sense is that eating is a priority of the board. And so to that end, we're looking to see if there's any flexibility that you have in the buildings as they are to make that happen.
Well, I think the quick answer is yes. But you have to look at the entire package. And so one of the goals was to extend the instructional period so that alternate ways of instruction could occur, as opposed to the 43 or 44-minute periods that basically work against them. It's about changing the pace of the day. It's about lengthening the time of instructional blocks, as well as providing the embedded lunch period and so on. So, we could say the quick answer is yes, but we could go back then to try to shave those minutes off and find that we're now extending our instructional period by 6 minutes, and is that worth the additional staff, the additional credits, the dropping of the periods, the 8 drop 2? It's a complex question. The simple answer is, yeah, we could probably shave some minutes off and create another lunch period, but have we taken into account the contractual 30-minute lunch of each of our staff members? All those things that led to the creation of the 57-minute blocks. We started with a goal of 60-minute periods. We thought that was optimal. And what we arrived at were 57-minute periods to work within the confines of our school day, to have the longer instructional blocks, be able to provide an embedded lunch. It's like a domino approach, and so we could start looking at that in more detail. My prediction would be that we then get to do we have a risk-reward situation here that is worth the risk, that the reward is great enough to take that risk, to shave that instructional time away.
So my follow-up then to that is, so if there's a contractual obligation to provide the 30-minute lunch period, then you wouldn't be able to, let's say we don't want to affect the instructional time, but instead want to shorten the lunch period. So take it down from 27 minutes to 22 minutes. we wouldn't be able to do that because the teacher wouldn't be back in the classroom. So,
That would be a challenge. I just also wanted to take an opportunity, because I heard Mrs. Brand say lunch is a priority, so I wanted to just address what I think people have perceptions about our current schedule. We're taking what now is really a 7-period day with a lunch scheduled, and the change in this new schedule proposal is to an 8-period day with an embedded lunch. We could have every student have a guaranteed lunch period in the current schedule. We could hold them to only then taking classes that would fit in that 7 periods. What we have now is students, about 20% or so, that are opting to take 8 classes in an 8-period day. We allow all of them to have lunch. They get a pass to go to the caf and bring it back to the classroom, or most of them bring it with them and eat during that class period. So there's no one that's actually denied eating. Some of them choose to eat in a particular classroom where it's, and I've seen been a lot of classrooms where it's fairly unobtrusive, but that could be something we could do. Again, that would deny about 20% of our students, or a little bit more, maybe even taking class that they want to fit into their schedule during those 8 periods.
the questions too that I'm getting are, why can't we add 5 minutes on to the end of the school day to make this work better? What are the contractual obligations that we have there? What are the implications of doing something like that?
That's something that would have to be negotiated, so you'd have to open up the contract. And usually when there's a length of a school day, then you also compensate financially for that.
Thank you.
And could we talk about the needs of the cafeteria in terms of the enrollment numbers that are going to come forward? Both headmasters can talk about the space needs in their buildings, regardless of how it is we provide lunch, and Mr. Cullen also has plans of what the changes to the cafeterias will look like, because I think we do need to discuss this.
No, thank you. That was actually going to be my next question, as to how many students have been.
Mr. Karen?
So when we get to the subcommittee report, we've got detail on that. And to this discussion, a lot of the things that I want to address actually will come through that subcommittee study that we did. But one point that actually we haven't pulled out yet, that maybe Mr. Cullen or one of the headmasters can help us with is, can you tell us how many students you can see in cafeterias now? And based on what we discussed a week ago last Tuesday, how many we'd be able to see in each cafeteria if we did spend the $3.3 million? They were given that tonight.
Excuse me, while they're getting settled, the other impact with lengthening the day at the high school has a huge impact on transportation, as it is some of our middle school buses and then elementary buses are late.
I think, again, what I'm going to ask the board members to do, we have 2 major things this evening. One, we want to attempt to give some direction to central office, because they're still doing a lot of fact-finding. Obviously, lunch is an issue, and we need to have perhaps some more information before we can, as a board, determine where we want to put it on our list of priorities, because we want to know, 1, what's feasible, and 2, the cost. But in addition to this, I think what we may be able to do is, if you gentlemen wouldn't mind, if we can hold off on this until we are actually doing the subcommittee reports, because I think this ties in. I understand where Dr. Clark is coming from. The facility isn't just a high school related issue, it's also an enrollment related issue. But if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Carey's subcommittee also discussed this, and I think that will come out as we move forward. But I would like to try and give central office some direction. Mrs. On?
Yes, thank you. Just going through the memo we got about budget priorities, it's really saddening to see that our move forward costs don't have much to do with education. So we just need to make the community aware of that you know, our move forward costs, again, don't have anything to do with educating our students. And the last bullet you have, the cost due to projected enrollment increase, I mean, to me, that's a move forward cost. That's nothing that you can, I mean, yeah, that to me shouldn't be at the bottom of the list, because if you have the students, you have to pay for them. As far as the strategic plan, you don't have to give it to me now, but I was just hoping for the number in dollars that it would cost to move that ahead. And, the last thing was the high school schedule. I mean, if we're, you know, my subcommittee, the recommendation was not to move forward at this time for most of the same reasons that Mr. Mottola spoke about. So that's it. Thanks.
So if I may, do you mind, folks, what I may do is start with Mr. Wu, you had your hand up, if I can have board members review that list and make recommendations in terms of what their priorities are, and if you're not ready and you want to move on, that's fine.
I just want to ask one question that was first about the periods. You had said that some students choose to do 8. Why, this is going to sound like, why would they choose to do 8? I mean, it's not like college where you're trying to, right? I mean, isn't there a set pattern to?
Yeah, I think some of it stems from the rich curricular program that we offer, particularly in the elective areas. So our students, that 20% or so that I talked about, you know, they'll take all of your core area subjects, but then there also are students that are interested in art, and they're taking an advanced art class. They're in the orchestra. They're taking the language. And they also want to take that one elective that's always been a passion for them, and understanding film is another English class. So it's that type of student that we're talking about.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Wu, are you ready to go through the document, or do you want me to come back?
I'll come back.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the list that Dr. Clark was reading. I absolutely want to maintain class size and maintain all of our student programs and class size as well at the middle school, so that we can keep that team structure. It has been working, and
Excuse me, Mrs. Dow, I'm just going to have you speak into the mic. When you turn your head, I have trouble hearing.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I don't miss anything.
absolutely maintain class size, don't reduce any student programs, and maintain class size also at the middle school so that we can have a team structure in place, since that has been something that has worked positively. Other things I have to look at, I mean, yes, I do want lunch with the high school, and I do want increased hours, but again, with the money associated with it, it depends on how, you know, this tough budget year is going to shake out, but I absolutely want to maintain, the class size and programs and the team structure.
Thank you. Mr. Mottola?
I kind of already said I support everything here. Again, I have the right to change my mind in January once we know what the final numbers are. And just with respect to the high school schedule increase, I think most people understand my dilemma with respect to it. I'm absolutely in favor of it. I'll ask more questions about that later on, so I'll leave it at that right now.
Thank you. Mrs. Diacona?
I'm fine with pretty much everything, but I need to have more discussion. Honestly, I think this is hard to say what we want to move forward with until we're able to ask administration questions and hear what they have to say. I want to hear what Mr. Vaughn has to say about the cafeteria. I have some questions about the Osborne Hill School population needs. So, I mean, I can give you a better answer maybe at the end of the evening, but right now, my hands are kind of tied because I haven't heard what anybody has to say.
So I agree, class size is of paramount importance, and I want to work to maintain that in the programs. I also think that we have to establish kind of a realistic baseline of what zero increase means. Is with 129 or probably more children coming in, and I'll ask our financial experts over here. We were just under $14,000 ahead last year, 13.9 something. That's about $1.7 million of cost load on average that we're being asked to absorb to move forward the same. And then we have the pension issue, which is, I'm assuming, potentially 7 figures more than we paid. And we have, in terms of this ECS, the question I would have on that actually is the cost sharing model changing from 4.5 times? Has that been confirmed, or we're not sure?
The latest information we have from the State Department and people who are working closely with the State Department is that we should expect no more than 70% reimbursement for every dollar we spend. Whatever the formula is, some years it's been as high as 100%. We were hoping for 90% or 80%. Right now, they're saying you could probably expect 70% reimbursement, but it is not. We hope that we could give you 70% next year.
Currently, we're at 100% over 4.5 times for our ECS cost share.
Is it 100 this year? I think it's.
We budgeted.
We budgeted
in the
100.
budget process, we went for 100%.
We're not sure that we're going to get it.
We're not going to get it.
What do you think we'll get
70%.
this year?
Right. And that next year, that will probably drop also. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars for us.
That's what I'm saying, that goes into the whole. So to be equal, we're $3-4 million behind. Is that a reasonable number?
Could be more.
And we can't throw them off the island because we have to educate them when they come. So that's one of my first concerns in terms of communicating to the public what our negative is to start, is to be even with the amount of children we have. Again, I'll talk in a lot more detail about facilities and capital requests and non-recurring requests in the facilities report. Osborne Hill, I generally support, with the exception of I want to have a discussion about the assistant principal. My concerns in that particular area have to do with what we're contractually obliged to do moving forward if we fill that position, and the timeline I perceive that we'll have to have that position based on where the enrollment will go over 2 or 3 years. That requires a lot of things to happen, but I want to have that discussion. And then technology and preventive maintenance, and that's one of the discussions I want to have in one of our near future subcommittee meetings with technology. We've got a serious problem with technology that I think that your team has done an excellent job of masking, but what happens is you get a 5-year plan and then it becomes a 6-year plan and it becomes a 7-year plan, and as someone who's in the technology industry, that problem is going to start to show itself in very inappropriate ways in the near future. So we have to look at this year and potentially next year as what we can do to catch up with that and work in partnership with the town to figure out a way that we can appropriately make up for how far behind we are there, because that's, I think, going to be an important issue in terms of being able to deliver the curriculum very soon. Transportation is transportation. I am concerned about that ECS piece. That's really what I have for right now until we go through the rest of the discussion.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts are, I'm not sure we should necessarily have to come in with a 0% budget just because the first selectman indicates that's what we should do. But I'm certainly mindful of the economic times and the desire to keep any budgetary increase to a minimum. So in looking at this list of priorities by the superintendent, the only ones that I see that could be considered so-called discretionary might be the high school schedule and the cost-related program technology and maintenance. Of those two, if I was to say one was more discretionary, it would be the high school schedule. I think at this time, just because of this budgetary year, the difficulties we're going to have in maintaining a fairly low budget increase, or as much as possible for this year, I don't know if this is the year to implement or move forward with the high school schedule as much as it may be beneficial and desirable. It doesn't seem to me, based with the other issues that are arising with additional costs, that we're going to maybe drive the budget in a direction we may not like. this may not be the year to add that additional cost to this budget cycle. So all of these, even though they are, in essence, non-discretionary, so to speak, that sort of have to be done, except for the two I mentioned, we're still going to have to try and manage the cost well and try and deliver the program the town's grown accustomed to in view of the economic times. And it's a challenge, and I hope we can manage it.
Mr. Wu?
It seems to me, unless I'm missing something here, that if we look at the high school schedule, you're saying you have 7 classes with a lunch period now, but some children, some students choose not to use that lunch. Why don't we just make it mandatory that you take the lunch? Because not only will you get them to eat the lunch, which I consider to be a class of sorts, nutrition as well as time to rest and to eat and to gear up on energy, but also you will not have to teach those classes, which should be a savings. I mean, unless I'm wrong here somewhere.
I don't think that it's you're wrong or you're right, but I think honestly that's going to take a longer discussion, and not to say that it doesn't more answers. What I
it's just not yet.
yeah no very reasonable. What I might suggest is if you're able to give us, and when I'm talking about priorities, what I'm talking about
No,
is
I know, I just wanted to, because that was from before. But my priorities are, besides that one possible idea of some programs being cut out if we had 7 periods. I would not want a reduction of student programs. I would not want a enlargement of class sizes. And I think a lot of stuff on here is right on, except for that I'd like to visit, as Mr. Carey is going to talk about with the long-range facility plans, about the Osborne Hill and cafeteria building and some of the other more building things that I think we need to examine.
And mine actually, I feel the same way that many of the other board members do. I don't, these are basics. This is what we do. I do think there are some things that we will unfortunately be making extremely difficult choices. I'm not enthused about not moving forward with the high school schedule. I know it's been on the table for quite some time, but we're already looking at essentials at this point. So honestly, class size, programs, quite honestly, Dr. Clark, everything you have on the list. My only concern with any of the lower portions, which was in particular Osborne Hill, is there's no question with increased enrollment, but just relative what parameters we have in terms of making assignments for any site based on pupil, location, et cetera, that we are looking at it from our perspective, at least that we are being fair and consistent. If I may, if we have then a sense, please stop me if I'm off, and we'll go back to Mrs. Iacono, and I certainly appreciate that we really don't have numbers, so we are operating in a vacuum. I think at a time you will at least have some sense of what to put on paper and what not. And I think then we'll see how some of the numbers play out, and then this board will weigh honestly what we will be approving and not. So with that in mind, I will go back and give Mrs. Iacono an opportunity.
So is the point this evening then just to move this entire piece of paper forward?
It's actually to see if you agree with moving this forward, to see in terms of you want to develop. If there's something on that piece of paper this evening that you just don't think is reasonable, that we should direct the superintendent and her staff to pursue.
No, I think it's fine. The whole thing is fine. It's reasonable to move forward and look at. And I hope that nobody wants to take anything off right now at this particular point, because we haven't had a real discussion about any of it. And if these are your priorities and you would like to move forward with them, Dr. Clark, please do that. I do have concerns about the Osborne Hill administrator. If there is another way to help the principal in that building without hiring an administrator, I'd like to see that proposal. I have no problem with staff and until we can talk about what the actual budget implications are. But I also too hope that we're not sending you down a path where we're wasting your time. I mean, if this board doesn't want to do some of this stuff, please don't make the staff go through this for the next month and a half. I just personally don't feel like it's appropriate at this particular point to say no to the high school schedule. We've been doing this for a long time. We've decided it's 8-drop-2. I don't think it's really worth it to discuss the 8-drop-2 schedule at this point. You know, and if you want to move it forward now, I just hate to send all of administration down this path of this is what we're going to do, and then come back and say, well, hey, it's costing $3.1 million. If you know that tonight and you don't want to move this forward, then I think we should just let administration know that. I personally don't have enough information to say yes or no at this particular point, but I would like you to build it in.
Mr. Matola?
I mean, I generally agree with what Dan Iacono was saying. It's hard to decide this right now because we don't know what the number is. I mean, this is a board that was essentially, we gave the town back $700,000 last year. Our budget was less than 0%. We have a teachers union who graciously has taken a 0 for next year. You know, I assumed that there were going to be savings because of their generosity, that we could use some of those funds to do some of the things that we've ignored over the last 3 or 4 years. So I think this should move forward, but and it's hard for me to say whether in a month or so we're going to have to make some maybe difficult decisions. But again, I kind of agree with Mrs. Iacono that I would hate to take something off the table right now, but I have some of the concerns that you have. So, you know, at this point, I think we should move it forward with the understanding that things may change in a month, or a month and a half, or 2 months.
Mrs. Zahn? Thank you. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but wasn't this the direction at our last meeting from the chair and the vice chair to have our subcommittee meetings to discuss this information? Yes. Okay, so now we're saying that most of what we did was for naught because we don't have the information from central office, and shouldn't make them do the legwork?
May I answer that? No, I actually have some questions tonight that I was hoping to ask of administration so that I could, there were questions that came out of subcommittee.
Okay, so then could we do that?
Maybe then what we can do, if members would feel more comfortable, I mean, I'm actually, what we have, Dr. Clark, thus far is I think we have everything, exception of the high school schedule, which I think after we go through the subcommittee reports, I think the board may feel more comfortable making a move forward recommendation or not. So, if we're in agreement, do I have a sense of the body that that's okay?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so we'll go on to our subcommittee reports. And members from the board, we have first Sarah Finlaw from Fairfield High School.
So some exciting news at Ludlow. Our girls volleyball team placed second in the state overall. Also, we had our school play To Kill a Mockingbird this past weekend, and that went very well. Right before the Thanksgiving break, we had our Alumni Return Day, which Mr. Tato talked about in the guidance presentation, and it's really beneficial as a senior to have those students come back who were just in your place a year ago, and to see how they're doing at their respective colleges and universities. And it's really nice to see that. Coming up, we have our Candlelight concert next week, which is a very big event at Ludlow. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. So next we have, I know our board representative is out ill. Mrs. Catherine Melvin is away this evening. For me, I have Board of Health, so I make everyone very happy to know that the H1N1 is decreased in the district. We're having a much lower incident. The next meeting is December 14th. I am also the liaison to the FDA, and just touched base with Marilyn Baranek, and basically her concern is the same as all of ours, moving forward in the budget. Mrs. Dow?
Yes. Well, finance and budget, Mrs. Iacona will speak on that since she's chairperson. In regards to CAVE, it's interesting we just had this discussion about class size, because CAVE has come out with a bulletin just last week saying that there's a study in the American Journal of Education that class size impacts achievement and how we do need lower class size if we want our children to achieve. Especially important is class size in grades K through 3, which is where we do keep it much lower. So that I thought was very interesting to talk about here with our budget discussion. As far as SEPTA goes, they had the Christmas Tree Festival with a quilt raffle this past weekend. It went very well. I do not have the total dollar numbers yet. I'm not sure if SEPTA has the total dollar numbers yet. Okay, but it was successful. They were happy, I know, at least on Saturday afternoon with the amount of tickets sold. This Wednesday, well, I guess that will be tomorrow, they're having, in place of a regular, just standard meeting, they're having a social and movie night at the community theater. The movie is entitled King Gimp. It's an Academy Award-winning documentary movie that depicts the life of an actual artist. Dan Keplinger is his name. He was born with cerebral palsy, and it talks about how he overcame all these tremendous odds to have a successful life and career in the art field that he loves. So it's an inspiring and inspirational true story, and it is in the evening for adults only, no child care provided. And then the third item, SEPTA's been busy, is that their annual cookie walk is going to be approaching. It will be next Thursday, December 17th, here in the lobby of Central Office from 9:30 until noon. We hope that you will come. The cookies always sell out quickly, so do come early. And in fact, it might not go till noon. A lot of years it hasn't gone because they sell out so quickly. So if you want some delicious cookies and want to help a good cause and don't want to do as much baking yourselves, then please stop by. And the snow date will be the Friday the 18th, or if it's a delayed opening, then it would also be on Friday the 18th. That's it.
Mr. Batty?
I was initially appointed to the Parks and Recreation Commission. They meet the third Wednesday of every month. They're meeting this Wednesday. Unfortunately, after I was assigned that, I realized I had a scheduled conflict with another third Wednesday meeting, third Wednesday of the month meeting that I have already, so I could not do that. So I had talked to Stacy Zahn, and she had graciously agreed to take on that obligation for me. So I will not be the Parks and Recreation Commission member. Also passing to the chair, Sue Brand, who I consulted with as well, who had agreed to, I guess, reappoint that person to Stacy Zahn, who I assume accepted that. So I have and they're going to meet this Wednesday, so next Wednesday, Stacy, I'll report sometime. The Transportation Advisory Committee, I have no report.
Thank you. The Finance, Budget, and Community Relations Subcommittee did meet last week, and we did have a presentation from the Communications Subcommittee about the Board of Education website, which went really well. The subcommittee was very pleased with the work that this group has put together so far. We gave them a go-ahead tonight to go ahead and continue with their work the way they have it now. And we're hoping to get that up very soon and have something to present to the board. I'm hoping probably at the beginning of January. The next thing we did was talk about an audit, and our subcommittee did recommend that we move forward with hiring an outside auditor or management consulting firm to do an operational management and financial efficiency audit. It's our hope that we can put forth this motion after the new year and issue an RFP to hire somebody in March, no later than April, with the expectation that they would get back to us with the results by July, hopefully with the commencement of hiring of a new superintendent. And then we can work towards implementing those recommendations in the budget for the following year. We did go through the budget items that Dr. Clark had asked us to address, and we talked about Osborne Hill being a priority, obviously, because of the needs, the staff, increasing enrollment needs there, rather. We did have a discussion about the high school schedule change. We did have more questions that came from that, but our recommendation in subcommittee was to go ahead and move forward with this based on getting some more information from administration, which you'll see in some of the packets and some of the questions that we're hoping to follow up on this evening. We talked about the racial diversity issue at McKinley, and it was our recommendation that we just maintain what we're doing right now, or open it up so that students from any overcrowded school can attend McKinley. And that was pretty much our meeting in a nutshell. Special Project Standing Building Committee, we are having an ongoing issue about whether or not it's appropriate to commingle funds. As you remember, the Osborne Hill project is now underfunded, and the Sherman project does have money in their account. We've received a legal opinion from bond counsel that it's appropriate to move money from the Sherman account to the Osborne Hill account. We've received a legal opinion from the assistant town attorney that it's appropriate to do this. However, there are concerns from members of the Special Project Standing Building Committee that based on past practice and in what the Board of Finance voted to do when we brought this forth to them, which is they voted down commingling the funds, but said based on what the Board of Finance, what the town attorney had ruled, it sounded like they didn't really have a say in it. So there's sort of a debate at the table of what is appropriate protocol at this particular point. We are having a special meeting Thursday at 5:30 in Town Hall. I encourage anybody who is concerned about any of these issues to please attend that meeting, but we will have a, I'm sure, more in-depth discussion about how we're going to proceed from there. There are some members that think that we should just do a mea culpa and go back to the Board of Finance and ask them for their approval to commingle the funds. There are other members who think that based on the fact that we've gotten these legal opinions, that we can just move forward from there. We don't need to go back to the Board of Finance. It's really a debate between the bond lawyers and being a charter issue. So I welcome anybody's input on this. I represent the board, so if anybody wants to offer guidance in any direction, I'm happy to hear it on this particular matter.
I don't have guidance, but I have a question. Maybe one of the more experienced town representatives has an answer. Is the way this small projects building committee was formed lending to this problem? In other words, if we had a standard building committee like we have at Stratfield or at Fairfield Woods, where it's just this and we're going, would this type of problem not be a problem? Or in other words, in the future, should we recommend that we have a regular building committee versus going off on this side track, or is that irrelevant?
Well, yes and no. Yes, it would have been irrelevant because you would have had two different building committees who would have been handling the two different projects separately. However, the charge that I just got from Town Hall says that projects under $3 million go through this special project standing building committee. The other thing is you could have had two separate building committees, and maybe they would have tried to borrow from the other one. I don't know.
Isn't the issue really that there were two separate bonding requests? That's the issue.
Yes.
And I don't think it really has anything to do with the committee. And so that's the conflict, whether or not you can take from one and give to the other. I had thought historically that's happened before at Fairfield. with other building projects. I thought that there was some sharing of funds between Byrne and McKinley schools where we were, I could be wrong about that. I thought there was some transfer because one of the projects needed money. So,
Do you know if that went through the board of finance?
I don't remember. And
That's
listen, I always say listen to the lawyers, so.
All right, so that's a to be determined. I'll let you know how that turns out. I appreciate your input on that. But good news that came out of that meeting was there, as you remember, was much discussion about the smart boards at those two schools. And there was a general feeling that the first selectman was not supportive of providing smart boards and bonding them this way. And then there was the issue, well, we didn't think we had the funds to pay for the smart boards. Well, now it looks like we may have some funds depending on what happens with this whole bonding issue. And it was brought to our attention by a member of the public that the first selectman actually signed the bid proposal for both the Sherman Annex project and the Osborne Hill project that included the smart boards. So the first selectman has authorized it, and we now feel that it is appropriate to seek bids on the smart boards. So that is what we are doing. We put forth a motion to get an RFP for 11 smart boards. Now we know we don't have the funding to cover 11 smart boards, so that will have to be adjusted accordingly. But we are going to be hearing those numbers on Thursday night. So I would like to thank the first selectman for signing off on that. Thank you. And I think that's all I have. The RTM hasn't met since our last meeting.
Sorry, Mrs. Lynch. Thank you. Yes, I did have a comment about, I guess your subcommittee talked about racial diversity. I want to know if that's coming back to this board, because I remember Ms. Kyle Leonard at our last meeting said they were looking for some more suggestions because their committee was exhausted, and in my personal opinion, to stay status quo for something that's not working is not working. So I just wanted to say that this is coming back to the board table. Thank you.
Mr. Diaconu, did you want to speak to what is your subcommittee of recommendations regarding that? In terms of time frame?
We didn't. Our recommendation was to, if I remember correctly, was just to leave things the way that they are for now. Mrs. Dow, am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, not to do anything immediately. We said that down the road, we know there is going to be some type of re-altering of lines for the middle schools, and then elementary schools where the lines would have to be changed, so roll it into that as opposed to doing something now immediately, today.
Thank you, now, yes, Mrs. Dow's correct. We said that the expectation would be that this would be rolled into our long-term plan.
So we're talking about racial diversity still?
Yes, relative to the subcommittee.
This document that we got, can we address this just quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Culture, diversity, taxes, I guess this is for you. Where does other fit in here?
I'm not sure what document you're referring to.
Oh, we got this thing, says the following information was requested by the Culture Diversity Task Force, and was basically
What's your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just wondering, because there's a lot of different ethnic groups, and I was wondering where other, there's the box called other, which is me. And I'm wondering if there is an other space. And I know it's kind of funny, because I'm laughing too, but I think it's something to think about, because there's a lot of us others, and where does that fall in it all?
Those codes are developed by the State Department of Education, and starting next year, these codes will change, and our student management system will reflect that. But those codes are not to our discretion. We have to report them according to the way the State Department wants us to, and these are the codes. So there
there are
is
others.
no other.
There is no other. Okay. And the other thing is, couldn't we get the statistics? This is just for McKinley, is that correct?
Yes.
Can we get the statistics for all the schools?
I'm working on that. It's
Okay.
not as easy as a
No, I'm
pushing
sure.
of a couple of buttons.
Okay. Thank you
But
very
yes,
much.
thank you.
Tim, I think you're on.
Right, all right. So, we'll start with the PTA council report. Last night was my first PTA council meeting. It was actually really great. The evening began with a wonderful award ceremony for our own Sue Dow, who was the recipient of the Alice B. McGrath Friend of Education Award. Basically, part of the presentation was that Sue has demonstrated her commitment to the cause of excellence in our public schools, not only as an elected member of the Fairfield Board of Education, but through her many years of volunteering at all three school system levels: Fairfield SEPTA as an RTM member, vice president of Quota, member of PAC, and numerous other volunteer efforts on behalf of the children of Fairfield. So it was very nice to see Sue honored last night at PTA Council. Also, there was a pretty in-depth discussion on the PTA Council's High Five and how they plan on adapting it this year, and it hasn't been finalized, but some of the key changes included recognizing the workshop teaching model as an important thing to maintain at the elementary level, the learning community model at the middle school level, and a priority from PTA Council was to look at the increasing high school instructional hours. And part of that discussion was to meet either state average or DRG. And one of the questions that, not right this minute, but down the road, that they had, and I'm hoping we might be able to answer tonight, is based on this new plan, if we don't change the lunch schedule, how many hours will we be increasing? So we're at roughly 9:30 now. One of the questions that PTA Council had that maybe later on the principals can answer is, what will we actually be getting? Will we be getting 1,000, 1,030? How much will we be closing the gap on the state average? Additionally, PTA Council's made a $4,500 programming donation to our middle schools and high schools to support family and parent ed, and it was $900 each building, and that was earmarked for presentations on bullying and drug and alcohol education, which is greatly appreciated by the district. Thank you. All right, next up, it's the big one. I apologize, it's late. We covered a lot of ground at Facilities Subcommittee. So I wanted to kind of get through what the sense of those discussions were. There's a lot of supporting material that the central office has given us here. We met for roughly 2.5 hours for our first meeting. It was an in-depth discussion of facilities and the request tied to this year's budget, a discussion on options to address overcrowding at Osborne Hill, racial diversity and balance in McKinley. We were also provided information on the facilities impact of the proposed high school schedule, which we've been discussing. So going backwards, regarding the high school schedule, we learned that we would need to expand the cafeterias at both high schools. The cost would be $2.1 million for Fairfield Ludlow High School, although I see that number looks like it squeaked down to 1.9, and 1.2 for Fairfield Ward. And again, in the packet tonight, I see it's down to 1.1. There was discussion whether or not we can reconfigure or utilize spaces within the existing cafeteria to accommodate more students. And apparently the answer was no there. There was discussion additional space would be needed for the year 15-16. So as we grow in population and as our population growth moves through the system, we anticipate having roughly 3,300 children at the high school level in the year 15-16 against the 100 seats we currently have at the high school level. And that's going to compress the cafeterias at both schools significantly. So that's going to be part of the conversation here. We're going to have to adapt these cafeterias for our lunch schedule at some point. And the question is, when's the timing going to be right for that? There was also concerns about whether or not the project can get started and completed by the beginning of the 10-11 school year. Mr. Cullen indicated that he would need to start in March to finish on time. Along those lines, we had our packet here, which is also page 20 of the now infamous long-term facilities plan. The right column is called capital budget project requests. That's not tied to our budget cycle. Those can be made at any time. It's going to be important in 1 second, and I'll tell you why. If we were, as a board, looking to make this request for the cafeteria expansions to do the high school schedule change for next year, we would have to make this request very, very soon to the town bodies to get through the town process and be in a bonding process by the time March rolls around so that the project could be started and Mr. Cullen can comfortably get these projects completed by the beginning of the next year if we were looking to do this for next year. Part of the other discussion surrounded could we use other spaces in the building to accommodate the extra students for lunch, and the answer was primarily no. And please correct me if I'm missing any of the facts, Mr. Cullen, as I'm just going from my notes here, but if I'm off, get me off before I fall off the tracks. The answer was primarily no because there's concerns about supervision, as well as actually having some of those food kiosks, things like that, in those spaces. They had to be portable, broken down, taken up, so it wouldn't really be possible to do that, unfortunately. Mr. Toll and I had a long discussion about the way things used to be back in the dark ages. Could we make the table square instead of round? I think the Sherman parents volunteered to take the round tables if we changed them, which was very nice of them. Really one of the things that I still would like to get to the full board after this report is done is, again, how many students we can fit right now in each of these cafeterias, how many we're planning to fit, and quite frankly, the reason I'm asking that question is at some point we may have 1,800 children in one of these two schools. So if we're going to go with 3-lunch schedule, that means we need to accommodate 600 of them. I want to make sure if we do ask to spend this money, we're going to be able to do that. Regarding McKinley, the central office provided our committee document entitled Options for Decreasing Racial Imbalance. You should have it in your packet. We were given essentially 4 options. One was remain, and this came pertaining, if I go off the tracks again, please correct me. One was to stay as is for right now. 2 was to increase incentives in terms of programmatic. These would be enrichment programs outside the regular curriculum to draw more people into McKinley, which would include a cost for staffing. Another would be to open a magnet school. The 4th would be to redistrict. If you have questions about those, I would prefer Ms. Catanelli to get more specific. The recommendation from central office was to wait until April 1st to see where we stand and then review our options potentially with the State Department of Education representative at that point. It was the recommendation of the subcommittee to go with central office's recommendation there and revisit that issue after April 1st. Next up, report regarding Osborne Hill. The central office regarded augmenting the staffing to provide more support in language arts, math, instructional improvement, early literacy support, gifted education, custodian, school psychologist, and social worker, and administrative support in the form of an assistant principal. There was a question as to whether we need additional support with a nurse, and it appears we need to communicate with the Department of Health on that issue. But that's something that I would like the district to take ownership with in terms of if that nurse needs more support there, let us know what we need to do to help make those requests to the Department of Health. Because there's going to be 560 children in the school. It looks like H1N1's receding, which is good news, but if that is an ongoing problem or is a problem again for flu season next year, I want to make sure we have the staff resources to cover what we need for that and, quite frankly, every school in the district. There was also a discussion, let's see here, I'll get back to my notes. For the short term, there seemed to be consensus that this was the proper approach. However, the committee requested to see the cost of these additions so the full board could have a more comprehensive conversation about the recommendations with the cost, which we've received in the last few days. Along those lines, also, we asked administration if there were models or ideas to have models in terms of metrics for how we support our children at all levels, but particularly at the elementary level across schools. So, if we have for 500, 300 children in a school, what is the right level of support for literacy arts, for math, for psychologists, for social worker. And there was a concern expressed if we had metrics like that, that we might have to take resources away from some schools. But I think that, in that situation, if we have to have a basement or a bare minimum that we need to support a facility, then we just have to do that. We have to, from an educational specification perspective, say, we need to have a nurse at every school. We can't part-time that. We need to have, social work at every school. If that's what it is what it is. My bigger concern is as it grows and our populations, especially in those early learning years, are growing, then we want to make sure that we do have kind of an idea as a board, at least that was my personal opinion, an idea as a board in terms of what those metrics will be, so as school populations grow, we'll know what we're going to need from a resource perspective. Then, we reviewed the facilities request from page 20 of the now infamous long-term facilities plan, and we had questions and we made some recommendations. These come in, this is the 10, page 20 to 1011, that's in the packet you have tonight. These come in three flavors: operating budget, which is regular budget during the year; non-recurring capital budget, which is a one-off, I think it's 50,000 generally to $1 million, $1.5 million town short-term bond, and then capital building project requests, which can actually take place outside the budget cycle at any time. First thing that was brought to our attention was St. Emery's School, which we now lease from, I believe, the diocese for our alternative high school. That lease is coming up at the end of 2011. And that was actually tied together with our maintenance facility in terms of this conversation on 418 Meadow Street. We have 6,000 square feet for our maintenance team to work out of. So if we work down that column a little further, that's the 81,506 number. That rolls out in 2012. What the central office would like to have us do, and what we are going to ask the full board and recommend to the full board, is to send a letter to the first selectman requesting that he gets in touch with the diocese, inquiring about A, extending the lease for that property, and B, if there's interest in selling that property and what the cost would be, with the rationale being if the cost of those two leases against bonding the property adds up, that might be an option that we want to look at. The reason behind this is that we've sunk a lot of money into St. Emery's, and it seems to be a good facility. So if we have to walk away from it, first we need to know, because they're not going to lease it to us again. We're going to have to find another place. And I think that last year we sunk about $150,000 into that property. Is that a good ballpark, Tom? So we have that starting sunk cost that we would lose. Once we get that information, that's really, I think, all we should be asking for is just that information now. Back, we'll have the basis to make some more intelligent decisions, and then determine if we need to go back to the town's facilities commission and look at other properties. If the cost is exorbitant and it doesn't make sense, then that's one thing. If it looks like it's reasonable, then it might be the basis to make another request. That's really where we're with that. Okay. Next, we had siding at Roger Ludlow Middle School. Roger Ludlow's Middle School's apparently got a lot of wood around the outside of it, and we have to basically stain that every 2 years, but we haven't since we built it. So initially it would have cost us $21,000, but we had to defer the cost that got knocked out. Then it would have cost us in the 40s. Now we're getting into a pretty bad strait with that particular situation, and it's going to cost us $100,000 to repair and double stain it. So we are looking to move that forward with the caveat that Mr. Mottola wanted to look at the option of vinyl siding and what the cost of that would be alternatively, to see if there would be any cost break for that against the ongoing of that particular configuration. The Dwight School bathrooms have an ADA component, but it's not a requirement because they predate code. However, these have been pushed back several times. I personally have seen a letter from a parent that had to split their children out of the school, one because they did not have proper facilities at Dwight. So I think that is something that we should move forward, and that was a recommendation of the committee there. Fairfield Ludlow High School windows, which is broken into two pieces between operating budget and non-recurring budget. That's the first half of a $2.5 million investment. They're single-pane aluminum windows. The information that we requested of the administration that we're waiting to get back on that is what the efficiency increase would be on going to double-pane windows, where we save 10%, 20% on heat. Additionally, something that came to me that I also pushed forward today to Tom's office was, do we have a problem in the exterior of the building where when we're losing heat, we have it being too cold? And now, are we getting complaints back that it's impacting the learning environment, that we have those types of windows versus the windows that we're looking to replace? Fairfield Woods Middle School, which I understand is potentially being fast-tracked, needs boilers because they're very old. And Riverfield had an acoustic ceiling tile and lights, which we'll address in a minute when we get to the capital budget request. Central office lease is the central office lease. We're still on that through 2012. Continued preventive maintenance programs. We're going to request to get those line items so we can look at exactly what that would be for the next year from a board member. And then the maintenance department lease is in place until 2000. Moving into capital budget project requests. Regarding Riverfield, we asked central office to break down the $4.2 million of work into the inside and the outside of the building. Basically, in the sense of the body, with Mr. Tola dissenting, decided, you yourself on that, John, our recommendation was to hold off on the external replacement of the portables for 1 year, to provide the committee a chance to better evaluate future enrollment and overall seat requirement at the elementary level. We still want to know what's going on in the envelope of that building, if we have to do better air, if we have to do other projects with inside the envelope of the building. We want to still bring those forward. If there are items that need to be addressed inside the core of the building, basically. So we're looking to have those broken out, the inside versus the outside. And essentially, the things that are necessary versus the code updates we'd have to do if we touch the envelope on the outside of the building. Move forward, let's see here, the next one was Osborne Hill, which was $1,650,000. We established essentially, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Collins, that was the connector to between the two buildings, as well as some storage space, and a large preponderance of that cost would be code updates by touching the envelope. And the sense of the recommendation from the subcommittee on that was to put that off at least a year, because we have a kind of a yin and yang here. If we're going to have cost for staff to service the children, we have to give in somewhere, and I think this is one of the areas that, unfortunately, at this point, is not going to be the best value for us in the short term. And part of that discussion was also tied to Sherman. Sherman has some serious core needs, particularly the kitchen that Osborne Hill got last year, so the children could eat in a timely manner, and several other things inside their core that have to be addressed. And the sense of the committee on that particular budget request was to move that forward to the full board, recommending to move forward. Lastly, major roof replacements with solar photovoltaic system. Did I say that correctly? Okay. Essentially, what we wanted to do with that was break that down into the roof as one cost, the solar cells as another cost, understanding of what we're paying for power in the building, what the savings would be with the solar voltaic cells, and also what the State Department of Education is now compensating for roof repairs out of warranty, and also for solar voltaic cells as part of that equation, so we can determine if there's an ROI on putting those on the roof and what we need to do in terms of getting the roof project moving so we don't have a maintenance problem there. That is the review of the budget pieces, I think. So then the last part of the committee was just in terms of what our focus is going to be. And moving forward, we have a short-term and a long-term focus. Our short-term goals will be include reviewing the middle school feeder pattern in anticipation of the Fairfield Woods Middle School expansion. We want to review this in regards to the high school enrollment levels, which are going to reach 3,300 in the 15-16 school year. We also wanted to review inappropriate uses of space district-wide to help frame our long-term discussion. Our long-term goals are to improve our long-term projection methodology. Cohort survival and enrollment projection methodology is adequate for one-year projections, but has failed us in long-term planning. So we want to look at other methodologies that will give us a better level of accuracy in the long term. We also want to review our building specifications. We've had some new construction in the district, and we'd like to get a level set as to how much room we really have to work with. Beyond that, we're going to create a set of core planning criteria or principles that guide the long-term planning process. Once we better understand what future enrollment will be and how much space we have, we can evaluate whether the current plan beyond this one page will meet those needs. Regarding the overall facilities document, it's our recommendation that we approve page 20 with the changes outlined previously mentioned, and reserve approving the overall plan until more work is done on our long-term goals. And that's the report.
Thank you very much. You guys were busy. I thought we were busy at our committee. One thing I wanted to just say was thank you for looking at this 2010-2011 page 20 sheet, because one of the things that I failed to mention, and I'm sorry, I forgot my yellow piece of paper, which is why I'm a little out of order on my subcommittee report, was the recommendation of our subcommittee that we go back and revisit this sheet and reset our priorities based on whether or not we wanted to move forward with the high school schedule and everything else that was going on. We needed to have a bigger discussion about what projects we really wanted to pursue on this. So I really thank you guys for going through this line by line and giving us some recommendations, because I do think we as a board need to revisit this page and bring this up for discussion in January as we discuss the budget, because I don't think we can do everything on here, and that's the feeling of our subcommittee as well. So I thank you very much for that. And we too also asked for some banding and parameters around staffing needs as you guys for Osborne Hill and all the schools. I thank you guys very much.
Again, on the report, thank you. It's now clear that 2 of the 3 subcommittees recommend that we leave racial diversity alone. Just for the record, I'm not comfortable with that, if you didn't already know that. So I just want to go on record as saying that. Thank you.
Mr. Carey, I think Mrs. Iacone was hitting on the same thing. So we have 2 committees thus far. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're talking about the maintenance portion of our budget, capital non-recurring and non-recurring, which actually we would like as a board for these 2 subcommittees. We still have one to go. But if I remember correctly, Dr. Clark, you said that we would be able to address this in the first January meeting? Okay. I just want to make sure I'm getting it straight. Mrs. Arnold, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Purple Woods. I beg your pardon, Mr.
Because that facilities meeting went very long. I only got to the very end of the Fairfield Woods Building Committee, which toured Tomlinson Middle School, so they could look at it for equity reasons. The next meeting is this Thursday at 7 o'clock at Fairfield Woods Middle School, which will be looking at some preliminary drawings by the architect. And that's an added meeting, and then the last meeting of the year will be on December 17th at 7 p.m.
And Mr. Matone?
Stratfield, they had a meeting last Tuesday. We did get an update, but for the public's consideration, here's the highlights. The construction trailer is going to be delivered there the week of December 28th. P&Z had a meeting on November 17th. Their decision should come out November 17th. Their decision should come out in the next meeting in December, and according to everyone at the meeting, it went well. Currently, the fire marshal and the building officials are reviewing the specs and plans for review. Phase 2 and 3 site work has been approved by the state to go out to bid. 4 and 5 is being reviewed right now. There's a discussion about this geothermal. I think I mentioned that in one of our last meetings, where the Public Works Department was looking along with the first selectman as to whether or not we could use geothermal to heat the building and also cool it. There was a discussion about if eventually if there was some type of recommendation to go that way, it would delay the project by probably several months, and the cost would probably increase. So that's still out there. There's good news though. We have the 100% construction design documents have been completed, and we're under budget. Not tremendously under budget, but we're about $280,000 below budget, and there is we still have the contingency of a little over $500,000. I think I'm representing that correctly. So the project's moving along, and I think our next meeting isn't until January.
Thank you. After all these years, I still don't know how to say no. Parks and Recs meets next Wednesday, the 16th of December. 6 to 6 Magnet School meets this Thursday morning, so I have no reports for those. High School Scholarship Foundation, there is no event scheduled for January 30th, as I once reported, and we're working on a date for the evening to honor excellence. I will get back to you on that. There is a special meeting tomorrow. They were looking to buy director's insurance. So we did have a presentation from an insurance person, and we'll decide on that tomorrow. Okay, as for curriculum policy and special programs, we had a discussion on the difference between allocation and expenditure. That was the big informational discussion. We did request a lot of information that our subcommittee has gotten just to go to the new board members, so they're up to date on those things. We did have plenty of questions from a member. Everything is in your packet that was regarding our budget discussions on cost of the social studies program, which was in the presentation, but it's clearer for everybody in writing how much that'll cost. Again, the high school schedule, and our recommendation was not to go forward on that. And again, allocation and expenditure, scientific research-based intervention, all that information was in your packet, and that was it. Thank you.
What I want to do now, if possible, again, I think pretty much what we've talked about in terms of giving Dr. Clark and his staff some direction. We have reports from 3 subcommittees. There are 2 major things. I think my sense is that this board wants to have Dr. Clark consider everything. The only piece that we're not sure about, again, is the high school schedule. We also have another separate issue, which is tied into it, quite frankly, and that is the facility piece that Mr. Carey has discussed. So I'm going to try and make a recommendation to try and close this if possible. What I see here is that we're trying to make a decision. I think there are 2 pieces to the high school schedule. One is actually the scheduling part, and one is the facility part. Perhaps maybe what we would like to consider as a board is to give direction for Dr. Clark to go ahead and look at the facility portion, because we know that's an issue with enrollment, and it's an issue with the high school schedule. The high school schedule can't happen if we don't address the facility. We need it also for enrollment needs. We do need more numbers and more answers, but I think if that's how the board would be willing to pursue it, if the board members, and I'll go around again, I'm trying to just bring us to some kind of direction on this piece. I know we have the rest of it, but what I'm trying to do, and again, it's a priority. It isn't necessarily ironclad, but I just don't want to have, honestly, a lot of people go to a lot of work without knowing what direction we really want to take.
I have a hand up first.
I'm sorry.
I don't think that's what the board was saying. I think some of us were thinking that the schedule can be looked at before the facility. And I think it needs to be part of that.
That's fine. So we got a yes for the pursuing the high school schedule. We're gonna go around the table and see if we can get it.
Pursuing it, yes, I mean, everyone wants to put out there what's important for education, what's important, so yes, we look forward.
Mr. Mahone?
I guess the short answer is yes, but here's the big but. Let's just assume that we're going to ask for the high school schedule, we're going to ask for $3 million to do this, and the town says no. At what point, it's a bonding request, and we're going to go through that process. I'm assuming right now that the high school administrators are planning their schedules for next year, and what they're planning is this new high school schedule. So what happens come March or April when the town bodies say we're not going to fund that $3 million, and they're already, I assume at that time students are picking schedules based on the new high school schedule. What would happen at that point? That's my concern.
Perhaps actually the best person to answer that is Dr. Clark.
I just want to make sure that I'm being, I wasn't being misunderstood. I'm thinking that the schedule can be one thing without the building out of the cafeteria.
And in my understanding, and I just so, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Carey or Mr. Cullen, that if we do the high school schedule as it is right now, that you would have to have the extra space for next year to accommodate the students eating lunch. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah,
or that's a fair statement?
That is correct.
That's how it was represented to us, and so then further, Mr. Klein has told us that to change the lunch schedule will reduce the minutes that we're getting and minimize the impact of the expense. There really are no other alternatives in the building, unfortunately, from what we explored. So we kind of come back to this very big expenditure to make it happen, which is, I'll say my piece when it's my turn. But
Did we just say that there's a possibility? I'm sorry.
Well, what I'm trying to do, with all due respect, I'm looking at the clock. We haven't gotten public petitions, and I understand. What I want to do is try and give, it's a very difficult thing. You want to look at the high school schedule, even if we can piece it out. I think Mrs. Dow wants to see it pursued. I think Mr. Mottola wants to move forward and look at the high school schedule and also see it pieced out. Mrs. Zahn?
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to see the superintendent's budget and then have a meaningful discussion.
Including all of these
Correct.
pieces? Okay. Mrs. Iacona?
Thank you, I agree with Mrs. Zahn, and with the expectation that I would like to see the board reprioritize the 2010-2000 list.
So I have very mixed feelings on this because, becoming a board member, a new board member, one of our superintendents, I think superintendent's number one goal this year was to make this adjustment to the high school schedule. And I know that somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, over the last 3 or 4 years this has been discussed. So I'm very, over the last 7 years this has been discussed. Thank you, Dr. Blair. So I'm very reticent to come in at the 11th and a half, 12th hour and ask to start tweaking this after the teachers have agreed to it, the administrators have agreed to it, and all the stakeholders have had weigh in on it. I have a very big concern, however, over this cost. I think the cost can be justified over time based on our enrollment that we know, because the kids are already here, are coming through. I just think this year will be a very difficult year to do it. I also have a concern in regards to being the timing in terms of getting this done, give Mr. Cullen and his team enough time to actually get this work done by the start of next year. If we want to go for this, if we want to do it, I would recommend that before the month of December is over, we go and make the request of the town for this $3.3 million, and we'll know probably by the end of January if this is going to be a possibility or not. That's one way we can look at it. The other way, for what I've heard tonight in the discussion, is we can open up the contract and talk to the teachers. about extending the day a little bit and fulfilling that 4 lunch term. And I don't know if that's a very realistic possibility, especially after a very favorable contract we just received. So, you know, that I think is going to be an easier hill to climb than the expansion, unfortunately. So I'm willing to go out there and fight for it, but I don't think it's a realistic expectation based on the economic environment. That's my concern. My only other concern with this, and I'm hoping that some of the folks who have been working on this for the last 7 years can help inform me, is that are we going to be in a situation now with bringing a new superintendent in July and seating that new superintendent with a program that maybe he or she is not wanting to? So is this like the ideal best practice where anyone coming in here is going to love this schedule and say, I'm so glad you did this? Or are we going to be bringing our new CEO in and putting them into a program that potentially we're not going to change it once we spend this much money, that's for sure. So that's another consideration in the back of my head.
I'm sorry. I want to, do you want then Dr. Clark to review the document that she has given us and then move all of these things, including the high school schedule piece, to see?
I think that I would like to get a sense of the body if we want to ask for this $3 million or not. Because I don't want to waste the administration's time. If this is the only way we can do it, then maybe we should just ask for it or not. That's kind of my opinion on this, because that's the bottom line. And if that's the bottom line, then we can go to the town for a capital budget request right now, and they can say yes or no. My feeling is personally that I think it's going to be very difficult to do it, so I have a lot of trepidation.
I'm actually going to defer to Dr. Clark in terms of the timing of this. Because we have a document that we actually, the prayer board, voted on, and I know that we had discussed in subcommittee that we were considering going back and having this looked at again in January. Is that still a realistic time frame? To answer Mr. Carey's question, what I'm wondering is, can we still look at this in January?
We can still look at this in January. Mr. Carey's right that it's the best guess on behalf of people with whom Mr. Cullen spoke is that the build out of the cafeterias would take 6 months. And so that's why Mr. Carey is talking about the time crunch. If we wait until July to do it, then we're just pushing it until this time of the year, next year, that they would be ready. There are 2 pieces to this. One is whether or not we've talked about the money, and we have to. However, as the superintendent, I think we need to talk about improving instructional time and affording students the opportunity to have lunch. And as board members, what we need to hear from you is this. Put it in the budget, and we will help you advocate for it. Or don't put it in the budget this year, and we will revisit it. Because this will be a tough sell. And we will all need to stand together and say, we know about the economy. However, we know that each year our students have approximately 70 fewer hours of instruction a year than most students in the state. And many of our students don't have a chance to have lunch 5 times a week. If that's a board priority, we'll put it in the budget, and we all need to believe in it and fight for it. If you don't believe in it strongly because of the economy and you want to wait a year, we understand that. But that's what we need to hear from you. And I know you may want to wait until you see more numbers, but I hesitate to asking people to do a lot of work and then say to them, thanks, but we're going to wait. That's what we really need to know. It's not just put it in so we can look at it. Put it in, we'll look at it. If at all feasible, we'll all carry this ball.
If I can just ask a question, I think that where some of the trepidation here is, and correct me if I'm speaking out of turn, is if we put this in the budget and we come with an 8.5% increase, we're going to take it out of the budget. So if, and that's where I think we have kind of the chicken and the egg here. If we can keep the budget austere, just based on all the things we just talked about that are going to be challenges for us, and somehow fit this in, I'm all for it. I think that getting more instructional time and making sure these kids eat lunch is extremely important. And I think that fitting the staffing costs into that is a very reasonable goal that we should go and fight for. I just think this is going to be the big, screaming, overhanging thing that will be very difficult to win. And I'm not saying I'm not willing to fight for it, but I'm going to be much less likely to be able to get it through for you if we have a 6% budget increase than if we have a 1% budget increase and this is fitting in there.
Right.
And I mean, this is really what it's going to come down to is prioritization. What are we going to give up to give this? From the capital budget perspective, I'm looking at what I think we can get through and we can't. And there's a lot of other reasons around this as well from a long-term planning perspective. But I think that we have to prioritize like the children eating at Sherman versus the hallway at Osborne Hill.
Right.
What I'm going to try and do, folks, if I can, get a sense of the body. Do we want then to ask Dr. Clark, and I'm scaling pay? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Pettibone, did you get it? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I actually lost track of it
I'll
around
try
the
to keep
table.
it short. We have limited resources as it is, both in staff and money. I don't think this is the year to do this. And I think we have enough challenges already on our plate. The staff is putting things together now for the budget that they're trying to make acceptable already with a lot of other issues that we have to address. I'm comfortable not having them go through the exercise of trying to put things together for this year because they don't have enough time to do what they have to do, they would really have to do, in my opinion. So that's my opinion in a nutshell.
Just a second, I have Mr. Matola and then Mr. Lowe.
And I don't think my question was answered. The only, what happens if we push for this and come March, we don't get it? What would the administration then do? That's my question.
We would come back to you the way we did last year. We would first have to go into the finance subcommittee. But if you remember the chart that we did last year, where we had already taken out of the budget, to be discussed to be taken out of the budget. You could take this out, but we would rather not. And then the bottom right-hand corner was, this can't come out. And the board actually discussed it. We would have to come back to you and say, we need to find the money, either to do the cafeterias and phase in the schedule down the road, or phase in the schedule. The board would have to help us make that decision.
So it sounds like if we decide to go this route and we get a no from the town in March or April, we're stuck with it. Because by then, it's too late in the scheduling process that we're going to implement this in and it seems like what you're saying is that we're going to have to take from somewhere else in order to implement this program. So that's a lot of money taken from somewhere else.
And the other aspect is, if we're not going to have a decision until March, April, or May, high school administrators are going to have to run 2 schedules. And students are going to have to choose courses based on, you may have an 8-drop-2 or you may have an 8-period day. And I'm sorry if I sound as if I'm really pushing, but running one high school schedule with over 1,000 students is really difficult. And if we feel that this is something we want, we'll work for it and we'll find money somewhere else. If we don't get the funding we want, then we can run 8-drop-2. Otherwise, they're going to have to prepare 2 schedules.
Point of order, motion to extend, Madam Chairman.
Second, please. Second. To when? All in favor? To
10 after?
10 after?
Yeah.
Yes. Someone. Okay, what opposed? Okay, we're going till 10 after 11. I'm sorry, Mr. Liu.
I just didn't, we never answered this question before, and it might be just completely idiotic, and I'm not seeing this, but we said it was 20%, but we were saying that 20% wanted to take an 8th class. Why do they have to take that 8th class? As much as I would like them to have experiences, we want them to all eat lunch, and we're trying to get through just another year where we don't have the budget to build out a cafeteria. We want everyone to have lunch. What, is there something that I'm not missing in this picture?
Actually, you know what, your point is well taken. I think Dr. Clark actually can answer that, because I think what has happened over time is how the students and how the program has evolved. I understand, and I actually think Dr. Clark is best to answer.
And Mr. Coyne and Mr. Irving would do a much better job. And please feel free to come up. One of the best aspects of our high school program is the comprehensive program that we offer. We offer some singleton courses. So multivariable analysis. Some of our advanced placement courses are offered once during the day. And if you are a student interested in that course, that's when you're going to take it. That may be when your lunch would have been. And because of the way the schedule rotates, and because some of our sciences have 2 labs, and because some of the advanced placement courses have specific requirements, you will find the 20% who take the 8 courses are the kids getting into the highly competitive colleges. When we were talking about this before, students actually came and asked board members, don't take away my right to take 8 courses. Which, yeah, excuse me.
We think we have a good way to illustrate this.
Okay.
A very typical student, very typical schedule. English, math, science, which will have a lab with it, physical education or health twice a week. So think of that science class as one full period, a lab right next to it in the following period, and probably in that same period during the week, physical education or health. Did I give you social studies?
No.
Social studies. 80% of our kids study a world language. So that's 6 of the 8 periods right there. They haven't joined the band. They haven't joined the chorus. They haven't joined the orchestra. That accounts for about 40% of our student body. That's 7 classes. Now, if it were, again, the average kid now has one choice. Would take an art class, would like to take a tech ed class, perhaps a business class, perhaps a family and consumer science class. There's your 8 periods. So very often, our kids are faced with the choice, do I want to have a scheduled 44-minute lunch period every day, or do I want to take that, if I want to take an art course that I really love? You know what, I'll take the art course I really love and I'll pack a sandwich. And sometime during the day, my guidance counselor will help me schedule with my teacher that that's when I'm going to have my lunch. Other kids will take the 7 courses, maybe not take either the art elective or one of those other electives, or maybe not be a member of the band and schedule a full period lunch. That's how it's done. And it's very challenging for a parent, a school counselor, or anyone in the school side to say to that student who always wanted to take photography or painting or culinary arts or fashion or accounting, to say, no, you got to take that 44-minute lunch break. That's how it works.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and my first reaction is you started off I was saying, well, I wouldn't want to take that away from the kids. My only question is this. We've been getting parent complaints. This means somewhere the kids are not, I mean, somehow it's getting back to their parents that the kids aren't having time to eat. And so I would imagine they're not eating in their photography class, they're eating in their math class, where they probably shouldn't be eating. And this is a problem. So I guess I don't necessarily know if I would love to keep that schedule that way, but I'm also concerned that we have a problem here, even if it's 20%, where kids are not, it's become lax, not because of anyone's fault, but over time, and now lunch is being lost somewhere.
For some, and in most cases, it's a choice.
Right.
And, you know, I'd ask you to sit in my chair,
right,
or the guidance counselor's chair, and say to Mrs. Smith, sorry, Mrs. Smith, Susie has to have a lunch period. She can't take that art class she's been waiting 3 years to take. You think you hear about complaints about them not having lunch now, I guarantee you would hear complaints, and rightfully so, that this individual wants that choice. And, you know, we're sensitive to it, and particularly with the younger kids, the entering ninth graders, the sophomores who have a much more prescribed curriculum. We push lunch over some of the other things. But
have you been hearing the complaints though about people not having enough time for lunch?
I don't know how to quantify it. Every complaint is worth.
That's true.
You know, every complaint is real to the person making it,
right,
and every complaint is worth hearing. But I would say, on the flip side, I would predict if we didn't allow it, I'd hear just as many or more.
I think the other piece of it is, I know that, you know, Mr. Tato could speak to this too, or Mr. Perna. They do a really good job working with the students on developing that schedule over time. As Mr. Point said, it's not something that we encourage in any way, and it's certainly not something that we would encourage with our ninth graders or entering eighth grade, you know, from eighth grade into ninth grade. We really work hard to make sure that they get a scheduled lunch in there. So I think it does happen a little bit more with our upperclassmen, but there are some of our students in ninth grade that will opt for it because of that richness in the elective program that they want to take full advantage of. The counselors also meet with them to sit down to say, here in your day is when you will have lunch. So those students are given a pass, they are provided that pass to show the teacher, to say to them, you should be having your lunch period 5 when you have social studies, or period 5 when you have English. We don't want the meeting in photography with the chemicals and the equipment around. We don't want a meeting in computer class. So it is actually scheduled for them on the pass when they should be having the lunch.
Mr. Liu, you probably wouldn't know, but I know that Mrs. Zahn and her subcommittee asked for the board members to get the program of studies that actually details a lot of this. It gives the course, a lot of the courses, the requirements, the schedules. Right. Oh, good. Oh, perfect. And I understand your point, and I think that way you actually will find it very, very helpful. I'm at an advantage. This is my 4th child in high school, so I'm much more familiar with it, so I certainly appreciate your interest. What I, again, am going to try and do is try and get into a direction. Okay, we have 2 things. One, I believe, Mr. Carey, that if we wanted to consider something like that, I think, to be honest, it would be best if we wait till the January meeting, where we will be, and my sense is from the board that we want to revisit the document that has the capital non-recurring and recurring and reprioritize for January. Am I correct? That came from subcommittee?
Yeah, and again, so the capital budget request itself is not tethered. Actually, this is something I'm going to have a separate discussion, another meeting about. It's not tethered at all to the budget process.
Right.
And I think it may be looking forward in the future. It might behoove us to time our capital budget requests at a different time of the year when there's not as much budget pressure overall town-wide. It might be better to have that discussion with the town in September or October than when things get hot in April. That's a separate discussion. One other thing I just noticed, Mr. Cullen did answer my question. I apologize. I just saw that in what we have here. The existing high school cafeteria seating ward, Fairfield Ward High School is 300, Fairfield Ludlow High School is 318. What that tells me is if we go to a 4-shift schedule, we're still not going to have enough seats in either one of those facilities, and they are roughly 1,500, 1,800 in 2015-16. So making the change to 4 lunch sections would only satisfy this problem for a year or two, and we'd still have to revisit the cafeteria expansion. So to that point, it's probably moot for us moving there unless we get over 2,000 students per school.
So this would again be something that we could reprioritize when we did.
We're going to need to do it probably in the next 3 to 4 years.
Do we have a sense of the body then about looking at revisiting the capital non-recurring and non-recurring? Okay. The second piece is, again, the last piece. We have Dr. Clark's preliminary presentation, and again, thank you for all of your work, including the staff, by the way. The staff also prepared a lot of information for all these subcommittee meetings. The board members did it very, very good order, as did the staff, so a special thank you for them for doing this. Now, what I wanted to say is, can we, I'm even losing my voice here, look and have a sense of the body, whether or not we want to have Dr. Clark and her staff pursue the high school schedule. I know Mr. Fadbean does not.
Fair.
No, I appreciate it. Mr. Carey, do you want to have this considered in this budget cycle? I need a yes or a no, to be honest with you. I really need to move because we're already at 11 and we're supposed to only have 10 minutes and we have public comment.
Yeah, I mean, I want to leave it in until I see what the total is, but with the reality, sometimes the effort you put into it, it's based on how far it's going to bump it out.
Okay. Mrs. Lightfoot?
Yes, and if I had known an hour ago about the enrollment thing, I would have said yes then too. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Zahn? Yes. Mr. Matola?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'm sure that the community is just eager and can't wait to make this. If you would like to speak, we ask you to please address the board. No one in particular. We do have a limit of 2 minutes. And if we do have more than one, it is a little bit tough. We do have people coming up. I appreciate it. I appreciate people are thinking ahead and coming around, and we'll save us time. Thank you.
Hi, Richard Johnson. I'm from Carriage Drive in Southport. I'm going to discuss today the racial imbalance. I'm a member of the task force since the outset. I've been pretty much to every meeting. And I think that just to frame, since most people on the board were not there when the 5-year plans were put in place, there was a task force created by the Board of Ed to basically do the handiwork to explore how to mitigate the imbalance and seek ways to take steps. And I think we met last week, and I think every member who attended was want to set the record straight that the task force is not out of ideas and has plenty of ideas and has plenty of effort at actually working on it. So I think that the notion that it's ineffectual should be corrected. But it was troubling, I guess, to me is a couple of things. I guess in my personal opinion, is that there were recommendations made by the central office to the Board of Ed without going to the task force. And it was even done before the task force even met. And furthermore, the task force wasn't apprised that these recommendations were made. So I'm a little bit disillusioned as a member of this task force since we worked pretty hard. One thing the task force did mention, and again, the minutes will come out eventually, is that they're looking for some support from the Board of Ed, be it a liaison, be it some assistants from the office that do some handiwork. It's very difficult to have the director of elementary education do the work for you. It's not appropriate in my eyes. And the other thing is well, I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much.
I'm sorry, can we get a clarification from Mrs. Kyle Leonard about that? Were we told at the last board meeting that your committee was out of ideas and needed our help?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Sun. Our board, the task force did meet, and we are at the point of, in our recommendations to the board, at the final point of all the recommendations we've made to you. So all of our steps this year will be a repeat of steps in previous years.
So you did use the word that you were out of ideas at our last board meeting.
Yes, and
Thank you.
at our last task force, what we did say, we reviewed how we can ramp up our efforts to get more opt-in and opt-out students. That is not a new idea, and it's not a new step. It's just one that we are more vigorously looking after. So we do have a timeline
Thank you.
of action steps that we'll be taking this year, but it's still an opt-in, opt-out option.
Thank you. I'm sorry, one other thing. You don't have any board members on that committee?
Board members have not been in attendance, no.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Hunt, and I live at 260 Brookbend Road. I am one of the Board of Ed reps for Riverfield School, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the PTA Executive Board. We would like to thank you for keeping the building addition and core upgrades for Riverfield under consideration. We understand these are difficult economic times and that major projects in the town side non-recurring capital improvements budget are not going to be easily approved. As you begin your deliberations, please be mindful that Riverfield currently has 5 aging portables, and just this week a small portion of the interior roof of one of them collapsed, though happily no one was injured. Given Riverfield's central location in a populated area of town, we would not be surprised if future redistricting plans add to or at least maintain our school population versus decreasing it. This makes our school a good location for a 504 expansion, which is what your plans are calling for. We are planning to invite all members of this board as well as other elected officials to come visit our school in the near future to witness firsthand the challenges our students currently face within the building and portables. In addition to providing space for the predicted student population, we believe that a permanent space solution for Riverfield is the sound fiscal option. Planning for long-term needs with permanent space will utilize our tax dollars more efficiently versus continually spending taxpayer money on short-term solutions, such as portables, which end up costing the town more in the long run and do not solve the existing limitations on core facilities at Riverfield. We respectfully request that you continue to keep the Riverfield building addition and core upgrades in mind as urgent needs during your budget planning. Thank you again for your consideration and for making the tough financial choices necessary during this economic crisis we are facing.
All right, we're going to quickly move on to open board discussion. There were 3 separate things. I know board members have begun to send me in their goals and objectives. Thank you. I know it's going to take time because we've had so much work, quite frankly, and that's why I would ask if possible to have all of them in by January. That would be very helpful, and then we can actually put it on the agenda. In addition to that, Mr. Flager contacted Mrs. Iacono and myself, and we will be meeting with him just very briefly on Thursday afternoon, and we will let you know how that goes. Further, we have some off-site meetings, which Central Office was kind enough to work out for us. We do have February 9th at Fairfield Woods Middle School, March 9th at Riverfield Elementary School, April 27th at Fairfield Ludlow High School, May 11th, Osborne Hill Elementary School. We had scheduled this pending approval. We were able to get it scheduled, so we're good to go. Is there anyone else that wanted to have anything for open board discussion?
I just wanted to make just one clarification on this. We had originally asked for McKinley, but McKinley had a scheduling problem. So in light of the fact that there was a recommendation that we see all 3 levels of schools, that's why Fairfield Ludlow High School was substituted for McKinley.
Seeing no further comments from our board members, I will happily entertain the work from Mrs. Zahn, seconded by Ms. McCullough. And thank you, and happy holidays.